I am so excited to bring you my battles and multiplayer guide for a Total War Saga Troy. This has been some time coming, and it took a lot of time to just put together the things I've learned about Total War for the past years, and things that I've learned also while making this guide. There have been a lot of people that helped me put this together, and I really want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. The tailor audience for this guide is beginners, intermediate, and advanced users. So I hope there is something for everyone to get out of it. If you have any feedback, any discussion, any commentary that you want to leave, please leave a comment below. Leave a like as well. Hit that subscribe button and that little notification icon to help a brother out. Without further ado, let's get started. So if you're new to the battles of Total War, or if you're advanced in Total War but haven't taken your hands into Troy, you can do basic tutorial battle and advanced tutorial battle within the battle submenu of the game menu. Oh my god, I just mentioned menu like 50 times here. So you can just utilize these two options here to get your hands dirty initially, and then to get them muddy afterwards. So you can get a very good idea of battles if you don't really want to be listening to me, which you already did, but I guess you can enjoy the rest of the tips that are in this video. Now, say that you are running the game, right? And you're trying to set the graphic settings in such a way that if you are in battle and if you are in the campaign map, you can rest assured that your FPS will try to stay above 60 FPS, so you have a very smooth recording if you want to record or just play. So the way that you do this is you can start off with high, ultra, medium, or whatever the game recommends. Right off the bat, you start off with those settings. Then you go to benchmark and you do all three of these benchmarks. And when you run them, just make sure that your FPS, when you do these benchmarks, are above like 55, try to stay as close to 60 or higher than 60 as possible. There are some settings here that I can tell you are the heavy hitters if you turn them on. Anti-aliasing, once you start getting to 2x or higher, it gets crazy how much it affects you. Unlimited video memory can affect you as well. SSAO, shadow quality going to ultra or extreme can heavily affect you as well. And these are just, I think, the primary ones that really affect you negatively. Oh, and unit size is a big one. So this is one that you gotta try to really keep track of when you are playing. Once you go to extreme, you can see some heavy hits to your FPS. It is also critical that you can, not only doing those three things, you take it one step further and you go to custom battle. You maybe auto generate an entire army, and then you go to Troy with the walls, and then you just start the battle. Just start it as it is, as default settings on everything. The reason why I say this is because once you have a large map with 20 units or 15 to 20 units across, both, two armies, you can potentially get into a very heavy scenario where you have a lot of workload for your GPU and CPU to do. So this is like the final test to make sure that your settings graphically are really good, and therefore you can proceed to potentially, if you want to, record your gameplay or anything else that you want to do, perhaps just to have a better, gaming experience. Now, in terms of the settings here, I could really care less about, okay, let me not say that because I want the game to look good. I'm playing the game. I really want it to look good. So there is one setting that I suggest based on my gaming experience with the game across many siege battles. I really want to focus on the keyword siege. So unit size, if you want really epic battles with really large armies or unit model counts, you can go to extreme and really push it to have really large unit sizes. Now, once you go to sieges, you're gonna notice that large is the sweet spot. The reason why I say this is because say you bring like 6 to 8 missile units and you start getting, if you're attacking the siege and you get within the siege and you want to start placing those 6 to 8 missile units like in certain locations in the alleyways, pathways, within the gate walls or the siege walls, you're gonna run into some issues with placement of units as you're trying to move them on the map. So as these units get larger, you can only put so many units in smaller areas in the map. So say where you could traditionally maybe on large put 3 units, once you start going to ultra or extreme, you could potentially only be able to put 1 unit in that same pathway where you could put 3 units on large. Additionally, large is a pretty good sweet spot where the game actually has a good balance design across it. And I think the multiplayer plays on large. I'm not mistaken. Somebody in the comments can correct me from the multiplayer scene if unit size on the multiplayer battles is actually ultra or large. But for sieges and for campaign, I really find that large is the best spot to just not have that many issues with unit placement throughout siege battles. Now, about blood settings, not much to go here. I play it maxed out. YOLO, don't care. I want to see all the blood in the world. Now, some people don't really like the buckets of blood in the campaign when you do this. I personally like it because once you start getting to the late game and you start getting these units that really destroy a lot of unit models really fast, you can just see blood splatter like crazy, showcasing just how strong the unit is and how fast it's killing enemy units. That's why I primarily like to play with this all maxed out. If you think this is just too much, I suggest you drop it to about 100 and 100%. That is just from a general usage standpoint in the past. There might be some people in the comments that might say, hey man, you know, I've used it across different settings. I prefer 75%, 125%. So, if you find something that is more optimal to you, leave it in the comments. Me, myself, man, I max it out and have fun with it. There's actually a use case for actually having this maxed out, I've noticed in battles, is that, say you have an epic hero, and you put the epic hero in a large blob of units, and you're just running through the battle, you're not really paying attention to the icons of what units are which, and you're just trying to remember, oh, I had the epic hero somewhere around here. Well, looking at the blood splatter, within the blob that the epic hero is in, you can try to make out, visually, not necessarily looking at the unit cards or the icons above the units, what unit is there in the battlefield. In terms of audio settings, I usually leave these all maxed out. There is one that people in multiplayer like to bring down, and it is music, because music can kind of, raise your blood pressure, not blood pressure, but like the intensity. So by lowering music, you can just follow the motions of the battle without having music manipulate the intensity, your nervousness, or anxiety as you're going into like a big battle in like a tournament or something like that. So it's a good suggestion here, just lower the music down. It might seem a bit abrupt at first, but in the long run, when you're doing battles against other players, it'll help you with lowering some potential anxiety that you might be feeling, and have a smoother sailing throughout the battle. Now, in terms of the keys, when you're playing, so there are universal campaign and battle settings where you can just go through and set different settings that you want to utilize. I really don't change any of these, if I remember correctly, across any of them. If I do manipulate anything, I'm not sure if cinematic smoothing ends up a bit lower than this. I like it maxed out. And I like the standard camera, although some people like to manipulate the camera setting, not just here, but in the preferences.script file. So if you do any changes to your settings across the game, right, across all these settings, you can save keys or load them, and they should be found in that app data creative assembly Troy folder that we discussed in other tips. There's a very important tab here that I want to talk about in controls. So there are kind of advanced techniques or things you can do in battle that could be really good for you that might not be visible just by going through the settings here. So it might be good just to go through all of these settings, just read them, try to remember them, and then practice them in custom battle. And this could potentially help you big time to try to manipulate units in different ways than just clicking right click on the battle, and potentially become more strategic or have more capabilities on your hands when you're doing battles against other players or the AI. There is one section of the controls I want to go in depth with, and this is really useful when you're trying to micro units by the type of units that you have in the battle. So there is something you can do here, and it is control infantry, control cav, and control missiles. Control I, control C, control M. Those three key combinations let you select melee infantry, cav units, and missile infantry units when you are in battle. This will really help you with potentially managing micro. If you're moving all your cavs in a certain way, all missile units to shoot at one thing, or anything like that. Additionally, for the abilities that your heroes have, you can select the abilities with the Alt 1 through Alt 6 here, so then you can have a faster time selecting the units instead of using mouse movement to go for them. There are a lot more controls here to go over. I suggest you just go through them and get the hang of them. Now, there's one very important feature in Troy that many people asked for in Warhammer once it came out for Troy, I believe, and it is called photo mode. Photo mode lets you take really epic cinematic screenshots of the game when you are looking at it through replays. So you load a replay, you start to watch the battle, and then once you are here, you either press escape, go to photo mode, or you do F2 key, and then the game pauses where you decided to stop. And here you can start taking screenshots. Now you might notice something around the back or around the image of the game as it is right now. And it is the logo and like I think it's called a backdrop or a wallpaper. So anyways, let me make sure I'm not here, speaking gibberish. So you press tab and then you can see all the options here of what photo mode lets you do. So I'm gonna go into details here. I'm kind of like a rookie at this. I've taken one epic picture with this for one thumbnail in a video, but you can take it to the next level. There is actually a phenomenal modder that has taken unbelievable images in photo mode. His name is Raf. I think it's SWI7. I might get his name wrong, but he'll probably appear in the comments, or you might see him down the line in some mods that you look for Troy. Anyways, some things that you can find here. You can do frames. You can change the vignette intensity around the edge, making it look a bit darker. You can add a vignette fall off, like to basically, I think, like change if it is from the edges towards the center of the image, I think. I mean, I'm just speaking out loud here as I'm changing things. You can change the aspect ratio. You can change the frame to look different. Now it's a copper setting. Let's go to darkness. Ooh, intense. And then you have the logo. So say that you want to take an epic picture for a thumbnail or YouTube. This is an easy way to do this. And then once you do this, you decide to take the photo by pressing space, and it'll save in a folder in your computer, which you can find by pressing browse. And then you have filters to change the color topography, I think that's how you call it, of the image in front of you. You can do documentary, midnight, desert. Let me see, anything cool here? Red Storm. Yeah, Red Storm looks like there's actually a desert. Sparta, really like dark, like the movie 300. Noir and blood, nah, it doesn't look that good. Legendary. So anyways, different little filters that you can change, or you can just leave it at default as it is, or any of them, and then edit the settings here. Then you have a camera. You can change where the camera is actually focusing in the depth of field to one of the heroes of the enemy army, a Cyclops Minotaur or Penthesilea, who is my own epic hero. Then you can do focus distance to change the focus in the far back based upon where the hero is. Here, f-stop, not sure. Oh shit, fading stop, I believe that's what that's called. I mean, from what I'm seeing here. Field of view, I'm not sure how much this changes that. Anyways, there's a lot of settings here. I have no idea what I'm changing on some of them. And then finally you have skybox changes. So this is like on the outside, I think, or basically like the weather, the shadows, how they look for the battle, to kind of change the intensity of what's going on in the battlefield. Like you can change the God Ray effects, make them a bit stronger. This will probably go really well with the Mythos release, as there will be more background stuff like epic statues of giant, are they called giants? The ones that went against the gods? Oh my god, dude, I have nothing. I have my mythological history is like in the gutter, and I loved Troy growing up. So anyways, this is a lot of little neat things in photo mode. You can spend more time here learning more about it. And yeah, look at what Rav SWX7 has done in screenshots across the Total War Discord and other places, and you can see the awesome things you can possibly do here. A neat thing that you can do in a Total War Saga Troy is that when you see a replay, you can either watch the replay where you can see photo mode, or you can actually refight the battle. So say you want to send a replay to someone so they can have a chance to fight the battle themselves and potentially try to do what you did, then you can do that by sending them the replay file and then letting them click fight battle here. You're not letting them, the game is letting them click fight battle. Or they can watch the replay as well, or you can just watch yourself, killing some, enemies, having some fun, and potentially take some heads, take some names. So in Troy, you're gonna have the capabilities of doing multiplayer battles and quick battles. This is similar to Warhammer, where you can go to multiplayer battles and find existing games that people have created, or host your own. You can also do them, across local network, passworded games, etc. Multiple different feature sets. You also have quick battle, where you can basically go into an automatic search system to find battles with other players, and from there, have some fun. you can do up to 4 players on each side in battles, and there are actually free-for-all battles in Troy. In this game, you also have the capabilities of chats. So you can do a public chat room here and select players here. You can just communicate with everybody, and then you can do toggle minimal mode, I guess, so you don't see anybody else. You can also create a room or have room lists to communicate with specific sets of people, and then you have friends lists to find friends. Something to point out is that if you do quick battles and you try to invite players to increase quick battles to be up to 4 players searching at once, in one team, you can only invite your friends, not just random people. So make sure you add people to your friends list if you want to group up for quick battles at the very least, or see them in the friends list tab here. I also like to have in the battle interface, and this is up to you, this is just my preferences. So I like to do default run so units move faster in the battle. Note that this might be detrimental if you use heavy units, as they tend to get fatigued as they traverse the map a bit faster. And then I like to have guard mode so I don't have units just getting out of formation or locations on the map without noticing. So I like to keep it in guard mode, and if I want any units to chase other units, then I turn off guard mode so they keep chasing after units. What happens here is, say that a unit's engaging another and the other unit decides to route or run away. I think those are the main reasons. Then with guard mode, your unit will not continue following that unit. It'll stay where it is. Now, you would think that perhaps all of the different types of battles in multiplayer have the same funds for both the attacker and the defender. It is not the case for siege battles and minor settlement battles. For siege battles, the defender has 70% less funds than the attacker. And then if we go to minor settlement battles, let's make sure that there are no units here. The attacker has 100%, but the defender has 90%. So respectfully, defenders get 90% for minor settlement battles, and for siege battles, they get 70%. Something to keep track of is that there are caps to units in multiplayer. So an easy basis or an easy way to find out which units there are is, number 1, faction unique units have caps on them. So if I hover over all of these units, you can see that they have caps on them. Chariots also have caps, and then mythical units as well. So for sirens, if I select one, I can't select another one because there's a cap of 1 per army. Now, when it comes to UI in battles, it is probably one of the most important things for you to try to manage. So when you click the spacebar button, you see this right hand menu that appears. So by looking at this here, you can decide what information to showcase in the battle. If you click this lockbox, it'll make sure that it appears once you stop pressing the spacebar. So let's actually try to test this and see how things look. Character auras is the leadership, or the character aura, right? The leadership effect that the unit that a leader has in the battle. So if you disable this, it doesn't appear anymore in the battle like that. Now, if I enable it again, bam, you can see it. The same thing goes with the yellow hue on your own units and the red on the enemy units. Movement paths removes that red line that Penthesilea has as it's attacking those units all the way at the far end. Then you have firing arcs. For missile units, it'll show you their shooting range, right? Because you'll see their entire arc that they can shoot from in their current position. You can hide the foliage in the battle so you can see what's going on, around the trees. But if you don't like that, you can just uncheck it and it'll appear. Then you can do unit threat level. So when you select a unit like that, you can see that it's green, meaning that the unit's probably going to do really good against that unit. So it's good to have that to have that information. Then you have unit icons, which is the icons that showcase the weight of the unit and their weapon, and then or type of unit. And then you have the unit stat bars that showcase fatigue, morale, and ammunition. And then you have unit stat icons that showcase fatigue, or with that freshness level that you see there. And you also have in the middle here, when you move a unit, let me move it, you can see if it's running or walking. So it's a lot of very useful information for you to know what is going on with a unit. Something very important that should be talked about is these bars here. I call them the unit bars. I'm not sure if they have a better title. Actually, let me see. Maybe they do. Unit icons? No. Unit stat bars. Okay, there we go. So unit stat bars here show a lot of important relevant information, right? So I want to talk about what these two bars are. The top bar is the HP. As you can see here, the unit has this much HP, which is like 60%. And this green bar here basically showcases that. So it's like an easy access for you to know how much HP the unit has left. Now, the bar below gets a bit more tricky. You might see it and at first thought you might go like, oh man, that's morale. Well, not exactly. So when a unit routes or, gets to certain levels of morale, it's going to be in different, I would call it morale states. I'm not sure that's the appropriate term, where they'll be like impetuous, fresh. I think steady is next maybe. I think this one might be next, wavering, and there's here broken. So depending how much morale you have as a percentile of your base value will actually get you, after you reach certain thresholds as the morale decreases, to get you into different morale states. You can go to steady, then you can keep dropping down to wavering, and then you can start getting hit by, all potential broken here, which will get you to routing. So, that's as far as I'm going to take it with this. I haven't looked at the actual numbers that are tied to what decreases you to the different morale states. Maybe I just created that. I haven't heard that term before. So anyways, really good to try to study this or understand it, or just when you're in battle, you don't have to go too low level on this. Just make sure that when you're looking at the white bar, you have an idea of, oh crap, this unit's morale might not be doing too hot based upon where the morale is when the battle started. I might want to pull it back, try to increase its morale as much as I can, so I prevent the unit from potentially routing. Now, below the unit stat bars, there's these, it's like 3 little squares, but I've never seen anything on the square on the right. I only see things on the square on the left and the one in the middle. So the one on the left tells you how fresh a unit is. This unit is active, so it's doing really good. Let me see this one here. Actually, you can see this with this hero. She is winded. So the running little icon is like in a orange kind of color. Now, the middle square shows a lot of potential information. So when the unit's in melee, it can show you that the unit's in melee and winning, or it can be in red showing that the unit is in melee, unit losing. Now this here, when you look at this description can tell you if the unit is losing decisively, how bad, like here it says unit winning slightly. It can give you a bit more information when you hover over the unit. Now, high threat on the top, it just tells you that this unit could be pretty bad if I engage it with a unit that I select. So that's actually something else called unit threat level here. It's very important to know. Actually, I might have talked about this in another tip. Man, whatever, dude. Just follow what I'm saying. So anyways, something very relevant to follow is that this middle icon here not only showcases the state of melee of a unit, but it also showcases when a unit is moving or not moving, and also, I can't show it right now, when a unit is hiding as well. Now, there are priorities. A unit could be doing 2 of the potential things that are shown in that square, so you could potentially not know one state that the unit is in, because another icon is taking priority on that little square. So try to keep track of all these things. They are good visual cues for you to know the state of units during battle. Now, in terms of these unit stats, there's one that appears when you have missiles on a unit, and it's that little pink bar below the blue bar right there. So this will give you a good visualization of how much ammunition the unit still has left. Now, one bar that is very important to keep track of is the blue bar below the white bar. So the blue bar actually is your fatigue. So you have 2 indicators of how your fatigue is doing. You can look at the yellow legs, which means that you're tired in this situation. But right now, you are like, wait, so how much fatigue do I have left? What's, in terms of value? So if you look at the blue bar, you know that you're about 50% in your total fatigue. It is easier to keep track of when the yellow bar or the yellow legs than looking at the blue bar due to just the sheer size of it. So I'm just gonna fast forward here, and I'm gonna get exhausted probably from shooting this weapon in a bit. Come on, buddy. There we go. So you see it there. I think now I am very tired. Not exhausted, not the bottom, not the lowest level. But you see now that I've reached like 25% here in the blue bar. So I am really getting close to getting exhausted. So we're gonna keep track of it. I'm very tired here. And let's see. Come on, get exhausted. Get to the very last one, the last value. Very tired still. Come on, I'm not even following what's going on with the rest of the battle. So very tired, still exhausted. So there you go. The blue bar got to the lowest level because I'm at the lowest level in my fatigue or stamina. Now, that is actually a benefit of looking at the blue bar, because the colors indicating your stamina level only, they basically group up different states in the same color. So as you saw, very tired and exhausted were both red, but now we look at the blue bar and that actually indicates the difference. So you don't have to wait to hover over the actual unit here to get this description that says exhausted. You can just look at the blue bar and be like, oh crap, I'm exhausted. It is really small though. That's something that I don't like about how thin the lines below the white bar are, but just another indicator that can really help you get information faster. Now there's one more line that can appear whenever you have siege equipment, and it is actually yellow. That is actually the siege equipment's health, and it's good to keep track of this as you're moving forward and attacking a settlement. Now, if you're gonna do a siege battle in Troy, right, in custom battles, and you're like, wait, how the heck do I select the equipment? Well, when I just changed from land to siege, you might have noticed something happen here. This tab is now available. Now, it is a bit bugged here in terms of what you can see available if you haven't added or removed any units when you first go into the equipment tab. Now that I removed the unit, we can see that we can select, depending on how many available assault equipment we have, how much we can select for the battle. We can select a siege tower, or we can select a battering ram. These are two traditional type of siege equipments that we find across other Total Wars. But going back to what I was saying, we go to siege, we go back to siege, or we go to land, we go back to siege battle, and we see here, we don't see any siege equipment available. When we add a unit, bam, we can now see it. And depending on how many units you add to the battle, your labor force increases, and therefore the amount of assault equipment that you can use also increases. So it's important to keep track of this as you're selecting units to note, oh man, I have all of these units. How much available assault equipment do I have? It seems that as you add units, you are actually equipping or actually auto-equipping assault equipment as the unit is added to the army. That's important to keep track of this, because you might see here, oh, I haven't selected any assault equipment. I add a unit, and it's like, oh wait, what the heck? I don't... Actually, that's a good point. What the heck? There we go. Now they're occupied. Seems that it might be situational, but just keep track of that as you try to do siege battles in Troy. Now, say that you have done a lot of army setups in Troy, and you're like, oh man, let me make sure, like, if I uninstall Troy, I don't lose these army setups, so I can keep them handy. Or maybe send them to some other player that wants to learn, you know, how I set up my armies for multiplayer. Then all these save files for your army setups, they're actually a file format called .army_setup, as you can see here. And they can be found in the folder called the directory you install your user based is at. Users, your username, right, whatever that is for you. App data, roaming, the creative assembly, Troy, army_setups directory. Note that this might be a hidden folder for you, the app data, so you might have to go to Windows and actually enable view of hidden folders to be able to find these files. And then once you find them, you can create a zip and send them via email however you want to somebody else to share how you set up your armies in Troy. Now, another place within that app data, roaming, the creative assembly, Troy folder that is very important is the directory where replays are stored. So replays from custom battles, multiplayer battles, campaign battles are stored in this folder, and this is where you can find them if you want to send them to somebody else. Now, whenever you're trying to send crash reports to the CA forums, they ask for three things. They ask for your preferences.script file. They also ask you to run a DX diagnostic tool with Windows to make sure if you have any issues with your hardware, and save all information from your own computer so they have an idea of what hardware you are running. And then finally, they ask for your mini dump files. So the mini dump files and the preferences.script file can be found in the Creative Assembly Troy folder. There is a directory called scripts, and that is where you will find the preferences.script file that they ask for. For the mini dump files, you have to go up one level in Troy and then go to the crashes folder. And there you're going to actually find where these dump files are. They're file format MDMP, if I'm not mistaken. And aside from that, to run the DX diagnostic tool, you just do the search tool for Windows. You search for DX, DIAG, short for diagnostic. And then once you run it and it finishes running, you click save all information, save the file, and then follow instructions on the CA forums on how to properly attach these files to your bug report. Now, whenever you are watching YouTubers and you see their cinematic battles or them zooming in really close for these like thumbnail camera screenshots, and you're like, why, how the heck do they get their character models to look how they, how close up they get to them? How do they get these cinematic views in combat? So the preferences.script file has all of these settings that you set in game, right? But even more than what the game allows you to do. So for example, the camera in game only allows you to set it into Total War or RTS version. But if you search for camera in the preferences.script file, you can find that there are more options to how to set your camera. For example, cinematic, arena, or debug. Say you're looking to where mods are downloaded when you download them on the Epic Store. So you gotta look at where you've installed your Total War Saga Troy game. It'll be within the Epic's Games directory, unless you customize this any further. Not sure, whatever directory you decided to install the game in, you're gonna find a directory within there called mods. Now this mod directory folder, it'll have all this like gibberish. To you, it'll be gibberish, not to the developer or Epic Games at least. And then once you're in here, you're gonna notice that there are files here. These are .pack files. These are mod files. So this is how the mods are stored, at least on the Epic Games directory structure, for you to find them for a Total War Saga Troy. Now, when the game releases on Steam, you're gonna find that the Steam mod directory structure is a bit different than the Epic Games Store. So what happens is, once you download a mod from Steam, you're gonna download a .pack file, and then also a image file, if the mod uploader tied an image to the mod. And then once it's downloaded, you're gonna go to the directory where you've installed the game. You're gonna look for the Steam library, Steam apps. Then you're gonna look for specifically the workshop folder and then content. Within content, you're gonna see, depending how many games you have, that you have mods installed for them, you're gonna see this numerical values here. This one, in my case, since I've only installed Warhammer 2 from Steam, or have installed Warhammer 2 from Steam at this time, this is the folder for all Warhammer 2 mods. And then here I can find all mods that I currently have installed from Steam for Total War Warhammer 2. This will be a similar structure for Troy. So say I want to be like, hey man, what mod do I have here? And apparently I clicked the building progression icons mod for Total War Warhammer 2. So that is how you'll find these mods, at the very least, from the Steam library structure. So there is this Troy player who loves the game a lot, and I mean a lot. And he's been talking really excited about the release of Troy on Steam and how he's gonna update his Total War mod launcher for Troy so it supports it when Troy launches on Steam September 2nd. So this Troy player, his name is Kadrian, and he makes the Kadrian mod manager that many people utilize for other Total War games like Warhammer 2, Three Kingdoms, etc. So it's something that you can utilize, and people prefer to utilize this over the mod launcher from the mod management tool from the Total War launcher that is provided by CA. So this is just another option for you to potentially manage mods. And how he manages them, or how he handles this, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, is that directory structure that I showcased in Steam library for how Steam stores your mods in directories. He basically makes copies of all those pack files of the mods and put copies of them in the data folder that you'll find within the installation directory of the game you are installing mods for. He makes these copies, and then those copies are what are referenced and managed in the Kadrian mod manager tool. So if you decide to, hey, let me delete a mod, a mod file that I've manipulated or changed for some reason, you might have to be careful with, where you're actually managing this, because you might potentially delete it from the data folder instead of where Steam downloads the actual file from the Steam database or server. So just be careful when you're managing this so you understand what you're going into. And this is a phenomenal tool that I absolutely love to utilize for Warhammer 2. Now, to download the KMM tool, do not search for KMM. The top hits are not this modding tool download. Search for KMM Mod Manager, and you should be able to get a first hit to a GitHub location. And once you are here, you can just go to code and download zip. You extract it and then open the, I think it's called Warhammer Mod Manager, actually, the name of it, I can't remember. But within it, you'll find the file to be able to run this alternative launcher to the Total War launcher that the developers. Now, say you want to do an epic multiplayer battle with somebody else and there's some graphical mods that you and your buddy want to utilize, and say you have like 10 mods or so that you both want to use, but then you're like, man, I have like 50 mods that I'm subscribed to. How the hell do I manage this? So KMM Mod Manager is going to really come into play when Troy releases on Steam, and once the support is there for Troy, you have this very neat feature that helps you manage modding profiles. So you can manage which mods you have turned on or off, and then save that to a text file here, like I did here, early Silence and the Fury. I'm not sure why I named it that. And then once I select that, certain mods are checked. This is for Warhammer 2 at least, and others are unchecked. Then I would press save, and once I do press save, I can share the output file, right, that I'm saving to my buddy, and then he can open it. And as long we both have at least the mods that are checkmarked on this profile file on both of our computers, then all those check marks should be equal across both computers, and you will have a matching setup to avoid the 30-minute to hour-long session of, hey man, what mods do you have turned on? What mods do you not have turned on? Dude, why is this not working? Why are we not matching? And then once you, the only way you fix it is going one by one through each of the mods and being like, okay man, there you go, it was mod number 317. Man, we were here for like 3 hours until we found it. Now, when you look at cinematic battles of Total War games on YouTube, you can potentially find that the aesthetic or the textures look very different. The colors, man, I'm just, whatever. The post-processing, I'm trying to add words where they don't exist here. The post-processing of the graphics looks different than what you thought the game looked like when you play it and when you see the trailers. That's because people like to utilize Reshade, and Reshade creates presets for existing games, and you can change how a game looks overall versus how it looks when you play it without a Reshade installed or a preset of Reshade installed. Now, if you want to install Reshade, just look for Reshade online. The first link should take you to this webpage. Not that this image might change, but just you'll see the aesthetic of it, and the UI is very similar. Just scroll all the way down and you'll find the latest version that you can download. And from there, follow the installation through the executable, and you can then try to import a respective shader, or is that what it's called? Oh, sorry, preset file that somebody has created for Troy or other Total War games or any other kind of game that supports Reshade. And you can therefore utilize it, and the tool manages the installation of the preset file and of Reshade for the respective game that you try to configure it for. What you can use to look at the CAC files of the game is something called Rusted CAC File Manager, in short RPFM, and it is a very useful tool that really makes life easier for modders and for people that do not mod to just look at the internal game files that are available for us to see and understand or try to interpret how things work in the game. So you can search, on your search engine for RPFM. The link should be GitHub, something like what you see here. That'll be the downloads. But yeah, you gotta go to the download section, download it, and just like it says here, download it, extract it somewhere, and execute it. And once you run it, you're just gonna be able to do global search across whichever game you have installed of the Total Wars that it supports, and be able to find different things in the files based upon the names that you search. Or you can just go crazy and learn about modding and maybe create a mod for yourself. Now, in terms of battle modifiers, there is one that is explicitly visible based on difficulty, and it is on morale. So if we look at the morale and we hover over the magnitude bar, we can see that we have a difficulty modifier of -4 on very hard battle difficulty, which I think is the same as veteran battle difficulty in campaign. If we hover over this skirmisher on the enemy side, he has +6 difficulty modifier. This means that off the bat in early game, you can have a net difference of 10 morale that you have to make up with +4 on your side or decrease the enemies by -6. to basically get to how the unit's overall design and morale performance should be. But what about the other stats? Are any other statistics also affected by difficulty? Not explicitly. So you don't see it here, but in the game files, you will find that there are the hidden battle modifiers that are percentile modifiers across a lot of statistics. Melee attack, damage, and charge bonus receive 15% extra percentage multipliers to those statistics for the AI, while melee defense and reload time decrease by 20 or increase by 20% on melee defense and decrease by 20% respectively on the reload time. Now, when you hover over these icons that have like a highlight on its basically it's a circle. Damn, I think that's not a circle, dude. Around its edges, it basically is telling you that it's a unique unit of the faction. For example, Guards of Troy, Champions of Troy, and Hector's Chosen are unique units that you only find in the Hector roster. Something important to note when you're playing multiplayer is that not all mythical units are accessible across all factions. So for example, Sparta can recruit Spartoy and Cyclops. But if I go to somebody else, hopefully I select somebody good. Okay, yeah, good selection here. Mythical creatures for Argos, you can notice that the Spartoy is still there, but he will get access to Centaurs. So what this is showing you is that depending on the factions you select, you're gonna have access to certain mythical units for multiplayer battle. Now, something to point out is that yes, there are faction unique units, right? These ones are not found on any other roster, and when you go to the faction selection screen, you will see those units, you know, visible when you're selecting a faction under the armies tab on the right side of the screen. But you can find that across different factions of the same culture, it appears that some have access to units while other factions do not. And some factions alike have access to certain units while some other factions do not. So I want to highlight just a little bit of units here. So I have Ithaca, and I have here Island Club Warriors, Heavy Island Skirmishers, and Renowned Armor Slingers. Now I want to highlight these units, right? Because it shows here these two units are like island based. And it's like interesting. I wonder if there's another faction that has access to them. So if you look at Salamis, they have access to Island Club Warriors and Heavy Island Skirmishers. But if I go back to Ithaca, the Renowned Armored Slingers are not a faction unique unit. But if I go here, you actually don't see them. You do see Veteran Locrian Slingers, which is a faction unique unit, but no access to the Renowned Armored Slingers. If I go to Sparta though, you can see the Renowned Armored Slingers, but you don't see the access to those island units that are available across these two factions. So the game has a design based upon like the playstyle that, you know, the developer wants the faction to have. Perhaps also where they start on the campaign map, as Ithaca and Salamis start with islands, or should play around coastal regions. So from looking at this, you can potentially go through each of the factions, try to establish patterns, and then learn, okay, there are faction unique units, but what else is there? What units are accessible across certain rosters, but not across certain others? So when you're starting to play the game, you must be like, okay, hold on a second. How do I know what faction is good at what? So we've talked about the different kinds of weapons, what they are good for combat. Now, when looking at this screen here from a high level, you can potentially have a good guess of what the unit's strengths are. So looking at this, you can see that this faction has access to elite axe units, meaning that this faction will potentially have good AP damage in melee. Additionally, on the mid tiers, there are some swords, some axe, there are some spears as well, and some charging spears. So on the mid tier, there's a bit more balance or balanced access to units, but on the more elite side, you can potentially do more AP damage in melee than other factions potentially can. Then you look at the missile infantry and you could potentially find the strengths of the unit as well. They have access to Renowned Armor Slingers and Renowned Bowmen, but no access to skirmishers. So this faction will potentially be able to compete against other archers, or other elite archers or slingers of other units, but it'll struggle on the skirmishing bus as it does not have access to skirmish units. This faction has access to medium and heavy chariots like many other factions, but if you go to Ithaca, they have access to light and medium chariot units. and they are skirmish based. What this is telling you is that Ithaca does not have necessarily a strength when it comes to chariot mass bases. So they might be better for using them against factions that don't necessarily have a lot of heavy units or a lot of good heavy units, so you can, you know, have a better prediction there. But they might still be able to do some good damage against armies or factions that come in with more light units than others. And then, of course, you can look at the mythical units and then have an idea of, okay, if he has access to a Cyclops and a Siren, how does that play into the faction? What does that mean exactly? You can manipulate units to come attack you. You can use the Cyclops to have some very good 1v1 engagements, and just a Boulder to do some pretty good artillery damage. So with that in mind, you can analyze this and then go from there and say, okay, this faction strengths are this and that, and this faction weaknesses are X, Y, and Z. Now, in terms of the HP, that is the first thing we're going to talk about. HP is just your hit points. Now, whenever you actually get hit by damage, not even talking about armor, you know, just actual damage hitting you, each magnitude of damage that hits you is a magnitude hit to your HP. So if you get hit by 1 damage, your HP is gonna go down to 5189, basically 1 HP point loss. The HP that a unit has is divided by the amount of unit models that the unit has. So it's like an even distribution. Something important to take into account is that each unit gets individually hit to their respective hit points. So when you're in a battle and you see that you have, for example, say you have 45 unit models and now you have 27. So 18 of them have been taken out in battle, meaning that those 18 have lost their respective health pools. The remaining 27, they could have been hit already. It's not like they're just all fresh, right, with complete HP. Or fresh isn't correct, that's a fatigue term. They're just with complete HP. They could have some HP losses respectively. It's all about taking out HP overall to inflict the morale penalties, and also taking out unit models to decrease the capabilities of the enemy to potentially inflict damage on you, as less unit models will be remaining to inflict damage on you. Now, there is something very important to talk about in Troy, and it is something called combat potential. Combat potential is the potential of a unit to do good in combat. Okay, sorry, that was kind of a literal definition. Now, I could come here and try to summarize this in 50 different ways, but I don't think I'll even come close to the great video that, I hope I say his name right, Sirkovich, made for Total War Warhammer 2, and I think its applicability also comes to Troy. So I'm gonna link it in the timestamp for this section in the description, so you can go watch it and get a really good definition of combat potential and know how to win battles in a Total War Saga Troy. Now, as for melee attack and melee defense, it's important to take a step back and think of how you hit a unit. So when you hit a unit, right, or you're trying to, you have what's called a hit chance. Now, a hit chance is based on an equation. It is equal to 35%, that's a constant value, plus the melee attack, it's a percentage as well, right? Minus the melee defense, a percentage as well. Now, when I look for this equation, the damn parentheses, I could not see anything with parentheses. So, y'all, if y'all have order of operations up in here, like, it's important. So if some parentheses are missing, y'all need to let me know. So anyways, coming back to this, I didn't see a parentheses, so we're gonna play off of no parentheses existing. So if you have, for example, 54 melee attack and 40 melee defense when one unit is engaging another, right? The chances of the attacking unit, or the unit that's trying to successfully do a hit chance, will be the 54 from the melee attack plus the 35 from the offset minus the 40, which will give you, if I'm doing my math right, a total of 49% hit chance that you're going to be able to successfully hit a unit. Now, it is important to note that in the game files, you will notice that there's a maximum hit chance and a minimum hit chance. So the game caps the percentage that a unit has to successfully hit another at 90%. And also, at a minimum, the minimum chance that a unit has to hit another is 8%. Now, let's talk about damage before we talk about armor. When a unit successfully hits another unit, there is no damage percentile or rolling of how much you're actually gonna decrease the HP. If your damage when you swing a weapon is 20, that's what's gonna be hit on the HP. We're not talking about any armor, nothing else, just the actual damage that goes from one unit as it hits another. It is not reduced by any percentile modifier. When you hover over damage in Troy, you can see the attack interval. This is a very important statistic that many people ask to be visualized in Total War games. And by looking at attack interval, you know how often a unit does an attack animation. Now, charge bonus is a magnitude that is applied to both melee attack and damage. To damage, it is applied by ratio of weapon damage and to AP damage. So here, if you have 300 damage and your AP damage is 150, you're gonna get a 50% or a 2/3 split, apologies, of your charge bonus. So in this unit has 45 charge bonus, so 30 of it will go to weapon damage and 15 of it would go to the armor piercing damage. The charge bonus, if I read the game files correctly, lasts 18 seconds. You might want to check that out. And it gradually reduces the magnitude that is being applied until the charge bonus goes away. So if you charge the unit, you're gonna get the 45 applied to melee attack and to the damages, but as those 18 seconds run out, that magnitude is slowly gonna decrease until it just basically goes out of the melee attack and damage statistic. Now, as for when a unit charges another unit, you're gonna see like initially a chunk of HP fly off the unit, and you're like, wow, that like always happens. I mean, if charge bonus increases melee attack, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna get 100% or 90% success hit chance at another unit. So there is something called impact damage in the game, and that is initial damage that is applied when one unit charges into another unit. Now, from what I found online, this is a lot of speculation, and some people have done videos here and there, so this is what I've gathered from what I have watched. You can come to your conclusion and leave a comment below on what you believe impact damage and how it works. So when a unit charges another unit, there will be impact damage, and impact damage is about 70% of your unit's AP damage by default. Now, I'm not sure if there's a role to that, if there's variability to it, but from what I've read, it seems that 70% is what seems to be, the default value. There's some conversations about, hey, aside from that 70% AP damage being applied when you charge, or impact the unit, speed and mass is another big contributing factor that also helps to apply more damage. I don't know too much about that, but that is something that I have read. Now, the last bit of information or statistic that I want to talk about is armor. So armor is a percentile. Here, your armor is 60, so think of it as a percentile. And what armor does is it potentially reduces how much damage you get hit by base weapon damage, not AP damage. How much weapon damage you get hit by when a unit successfully hits you. Note that AP damage does not go through the armor reduction. It just directly goes to the HP when it successfully hits a unit. Now, aside from it just being 60%, it's not a constant. So armor has a percentile multiplier to it that can potentially lower it from the magnitude that the unit has. So if the unit has 60% or 60 armor here, right, you have a minimum armor roll, or aka percentile, of 50% and up to 100%. So every time a unit successfully hits you, you're gonna potentially have a minimum for this unit's armor of 30 armor and up to 60 armor. That's how much the weapon damage is gonna get reduced when you get hit by another unit. Now, say for example, you magically get to an armor of 200, and I don't think I've ever seen it that high now that I think about it. Now, if you magically get to 200, right, and you get the minimum roll of 50%, if you do the math, 200% times 50% is 100%. That means that the weapon damage is basically going to be nullified because you're not going to get hit by the weapon damage due to the armor percentile reduction that it gets hit by. Now, there has been some discussions here and there from my research. Some people say that there's at least a 1% damage that always gets applied, like an offset. So even if you get to 100% in your mind, the game will just leave it at 99%. So you'll still get hit by 1% of the weapon damage. I don't know that per se. I did not test it, but from my research, that is some discussions that some people have had on how armor works. Note that armor does not just get applied to the damage of a unit, it also gets applied to the missile damage. So that resistance can still occur to both the base missile damage and to the weapon damage. Now, something prevalent that happens when units hit each other is that there's something called stagger and knockdowns. So if a unit has an attack interval of like say 4 seconds and it swings at another unit, it could potentially stagger it, making it sort of like bump it and be like, oh crap, oh shit, I got hit. And then when that happens, the other unit can potentially be hurt in its potential DPS output because it's not exactly working off of its base attack interval. It's getting staggered and delayed in its potential attacks. There's also the capability of a unit getting knocked down in combat. You will see that more often than not with the new mythical units being added to the game, potentially causing knockdowns on other units. When a unit gets knocked down, I mean, they can't hit, and they're not going through their attack intervals until they get back up. So it is a way to further reduce the damage output of another unit if you can knock it down. Now, if you want to get a really good idea in terms of what all of the morale debuffs are in the game, certain unique thresholds to make sure the unit routes, shatters, etc., you can go to the DB in the data.pack file location of the Troy mod files. Go to the DB and then go to the KV morales table here and open the data file. And once you're here, you can just organize by the value and just make it go up and down, or from lowest value to highest value. And then you can see all of these different thresholds and morale debuffs that you can potentially stack in the game, and you can learn how to really manipulate morale, which in my opinion is the most important unit statistic in the game. So in Troy, you can increase the unit rank of the unit in combat. So as a unit gains experience, you actually can increase its unit rank. When you increase a unit rank, you specifically increase certain statistics. So I click this once, right? And you can see in green what increases. They are morale, melee attack, melee defense, and missile damage. So what this is saying is that the unit will potentially last longer in combat before it decides to rout. It will have a higher probability to hit, a higher probability to not get hit, and in terms of missiles, it'll do more damage with missiles. Now let's look at how this is applied. This is 20 and 26 here. We decrease this, it is still 20 and 26, the reload time is 7.5. So it appears that what changes over time is the reload time, not the missile damage or the AP damage that is being applied. It is simply the reload time. As we keep increasing this, it increases higher and higher and higher. We can see that the damages stay the same, but the reload time has decreased. And still, the other statistics that are being affected up to the highest rank, 9, are morale, melee attack, and melee defense. Now, what is the magnitudes that they increase? It is by 1 on morale, melee attack, and melee defense, and missile damage, it is based on the change that is occurring on the reload time. There is one last change, and this one's not visible as a unit ranks up. So as a unit increases in rank to rank 5, it actually slows down how fast it loses stamina in battle. So this is a very important parameter to think about, because you can really slow down dropping your stamina level so you don't get exhausted that fast in battle, and therefore perform better over time in the duration of combat. Now, something to take into account about missile resistance and preventing missiles from hitting you is that units can have two things. They can have a missile resistance, which is how much damage is resisted if a missile hits you, and there is shielded missile resistance, which is decreasing the probability that a missile will even hit you. Now, don't get overwhelmed. I know I'm showing a lot here and it's a bit crazy. So in the game, there are actually units and heroes that have splash attacks, but the game doesn't explicitly tell you that when you are playing it on the unit stack card. Splash attacks are able to do like an AoE of attack range in front of the unit that, you're attacking. So like, for example, if you swing with a Cyclops, you'll see his club just swing across and you'll see like a wind gust as he's attacking. And then that'll basically hit multiple unit models. And there's a couple of units that have splash attacks and heroes in the game. So we can start from the bottom. And as we can see from the bottom, working our way up, all of the giant units appear to have the capability of being able to have splash attacks, including the Minotaur here. It looks a bit different in terms of how it's written in the table. And then also the Cyclops up here. In terms of heroes, it seems that most hero types, I mean, Archer, Defender, Fighter, Warlord, they all have the splash attacks. And then it explicitly states certain heroes that they do have splash attacks. I'm not sure why there are specific entries in the tables. Oh, because they probably have different values maybe, in terms of how much they can actually damage maybe. So we have Ajax here, we have Penthesilea, we have Achilles and Hector. So from this table, you can get a good idea of what has pretty good splash attacks and in the game and how much damage they do. Now, one question you might have is, well, I mean, do all hero units, epic hero units, have splash attacks? I mean, I saw Warlord, Defender, you know, all these guys. Well, there are individual entries for the epic heroes in the melee stat tables table that I'm looking at, and some of them actually do not have entries for splash attacks. So for example, if we look at Diomedes here, he does not have a splash attack target size, which my assumption from looking at this is that he does not have splash attacks. So if I organize this again, based upon the entry in the splash attack target size range, explicit epic heroes that appear to have splash attacks are Ajax, Penthesilea, Achilles, and Hector. A very important aspect of battles in a Total War Saga Troy is fatigue. So as a unit is in combat, you're going to notice that it's going to potentially go from being fresh to active to winded to tired, very tired, and then exhausted. As you work your way through all these different fatigues, different statistics are going to be negatively affected. So we're going to work one by one to understand what each of them does. So if we look at active, let me take a step back first before getting into active. If we look at fresh, which isn't here, and compare it to active, if implicitly, we see here that active has a multiplier or a reduction to melee attack of 5%. So my assumption here is that when you are fresh, you do 5% more melee attack. Now, once you work your way towards winded here, we see that some other statistics are now being affected. Melee attack has not decreased further, but now we have 10% penalty to reloading and to melee AP damage to the unit. There is now a speed reduction of 5% also introduced. After winded, we go to tired, and then here some of these decrease further in magnitude and new parameters start getting affected. Now we see that armor and charge bonus come into the picture along with melee defense. So let's work through these. Speed now is 85. We see armor is also 85, so both of them have a 15% reduction. Charge bonus, melee AP damage, and melee defense have 10% reductions, and melee attack and reloading have 15% reductions. So we see that more statistics are being affected here, and it's across the board. It's not just missile or melee units that are being affected, but also missile units in their DPS and their speed, which helps them adjust or get to their attack order faster. After tired, we go to very tired, and here the magnitudes just start to increase. We don't see any new parameters being affected. Reload, a 25% reduction, melee defense 20%, melee AP damage 10%, melee attack 25%, charge bonus 30%, armor 35%, and speed is now 20% penalty. That's pretty steep. And then we get to the final level, and you just want to avoid this as much as possible. Looking at this, your speed now is reduced by 30%. Armor and charge bonus are both decreased by 50%. That is humongous. So now base AP or base damage is more probable to hit you, and if you're charging, you're really not gonna be doing that much damage on your charge. If speed is one of the parameters, right, that affect impact damage, you're potentially not having such a big impact damage on your charge on the enemy. Then you have melee attack at 30%, melee damage AP at 15%, melee defense at 30%, and then reloading drops 35%. So from what we see here, across the board, both melee and missile units get heavily affected by fatigue, and you really want to push to be as fresh as possible in your battles. Now, when talking about the fatigue penalties, it's important to note that on the table that was shown, one aspect that was not shown is how morale is affected by the fatigue level of a unit. So if we look at this unit, for example, that's potentially going to route pretty soon, it is very tired, and that actually causes a -5 morale penalty. So add to all the penalties that are discussed of fatigue, that morale is also affected. Now for fatigue, you're going to notice that there are thresholds for each of them, right? For exhausted, very tired, winded, and it's just a magnitude. It's kind of hard to keep track of this when you're in the battle, but just note that, as you're in the battle, you can potentially remember that there are differences in magnitude between each of the levels, and you can here make out just how long it takes to get to the last fatigue levels. As we look at the differentials from active to exhausted, it appears that it takes longer to go towards the more exhausted levels of fatigue than it is to go from the more fresh levels of fatigue. So you work your way faster from fresh down to tired, but once you get to tired, it takes a bit longer or requires more stamina to get all the way down to exhausted. Now, as you're traversing the map in battle, there are different actions that you do that cause you to lose fatigue faster or slower. So, for example, if you're shooting, it's going to cost you 18 in stamina, I guess. I'm trying to see the best way to interpret this, but from looking at this, it seems that all these different actions that you do as you are in the battle, running, walking, etc., either increase your stamina loss or actually help you regain it. So it shows you that if you're walking, you have a modifier here of -5. What I'm assuming by reading this is that if you are just walking, you're not necessarily going to be losing fatigue. You're actually going to be net gaining fatigue. And then once you work your way down, you can see that if you're idle, that is the fastest way for you to get fatigue back at a -22. Not sure if this is per second or how this stat is divided by time, but you can definitely interpret from the negative values that doing these actions here can help you regain stamina, and doing these actions here actually contribute to you losing stamina. In Troy, there are multiple weight classes, and it is important to differentiate them and identify how to know what weight is which as fast as possible. The fastest way to know what weight class is which is by looking at the geometry of the icons the units have above their unit cards. So if we look at these units here, for example, the Militia Warband have a circle around their spear weapon. That indicates that the weight class is light. Similarly, you can look at a light chariot and it has a circle around its weapon type symbol. We move on to medium weight class and we see that we have a swordsman here with a square along with a Anatolian chariot, which is a medium chariot, showcasing the same style of geometric icon or shape. Then we have weight class heavy, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a hexagon. I think it's a hexagon. Oh my god, how the hell am I a damn engineer and I don't know my damn geometry? Jeez. Anyways, so by weight class being heavy, you can then see that renowned swordsman has this hexagon icon around its sword weapon. Then similarly, you can see it on a heavy chariot that it has the hexagon shape. Now, where it comes to mythical units, they can have different weight classes, light, medium, heavy, but you can't follow the geometric shape because the unit being mythical actually manipulates the geometric shape over, or taking precedent over, the geometric icon identification system that I indicated for melee, missile, and chariot units. Now, it is important to talk about what weight classes are good for in a Total War Saga Troy. So, too long didn't watch summary of this, which is basically the entire tips duration, but whatever. So, when you have a weight class that is light, you'll relatively have more speed than weight classes that are of heavier weight, and additionally, you will actually last longer in combat, so your fatigue will decrease more slowly, so that's better for you. Additionally, more terrains are favorable for you, except shallow waters. Then for weight class medium, they tend to have a bit better statistics than the light units in terms of just overall, and they don't move as fast as light units, and their stamina does not last as long. But with those added capabilities to their unit statistics, they help them be more versatile in combat. Now finally, heavy units are the slowest of the 3 weight classes, And also, they lose stamina faster than the other 3 weight classes. They do have an advantage in that if chariots charge them, they don't necessarily run through them. It's like they hit a brick wall, which is really favorable in those kinds of engagements. Additionally, given that their statistics tend to really favor their armor, their melee defense, their damage, and also good HP per unit model, it makes them do pretty good in prolonged combat against other lighter weight units as fatigue kicks in, because the penalties to offensive statistics, which are more favorable for medium and light units, will make them suffer more in a prolonged engagement. Now, it is important to differentiate something in the game. There's something called weight classes, right, which is light, medium, heavy. There's something called mass. You don't really see that visually in the unit statistics on the right. Weight class does not necessarily equal mass. It's an indicator of the mass of a unit. So what I mean by that is, you can have a chariot unit that is heavy, and you can have a heavy giant unit on the weight class spectrum, but their masses can be different. It is just that they are above a certain threshold that therefore indicates it's sort of heavy weight class that they belong in. Now, aside from weight class, there is something else that's very important for you to keep track of. Do you see this icon here that it's kind of small compared to the weapon? This is what's called a small entity. Depending on the unit that you select, it will be either a small entity or a large entity, and that is separate from the weight class. So for example, let's look at Hector here. He is a large entity right now because he has a chariot. But when I take him out of the chariot, you see the icon size changes and it becomes a small entity. This is important because some units have a bonus versus large. So if you look over here in the damage bonuses that we see here, we see a bonus versus large of 10. That applies to large entities. Now, something very important to talk about Troy are the 4 weapon types and what each of them are good for. It is important to note that of the 4 weapon types, 3 of them can actually hold shields, and all of them can be two-handed. The specific weapon type that can only hold a shield and its weapon and not be two-handed is a sword unit. All sword units are sword and shielded. Now, sword units tend to have a bonus versus spearmen, and they tend to have better AP damage than spearmen. What this means is that they can potentially trade really well with relatively same cost spearmen units, and they are better at all around being good against other types of infantry units, including the spearmen. The spearmen, on the other hand, they do have bonuses against other types of infantry like axemen, also swordsmen, and bonus versus large. They're the only infantry unit with a bonus versus large, but they do tend to have the lowest AP damage, or lower AP damage at least, than the swords and axes. What this is telling me is spear units can be good defensive units, potentially get a bit better melee attack because they relatively have low melee attack to sustain against other units, but they definitely won't trade very well with comparable sword units. Then you have shieldless spears. Shieldless spears, it's a unit without a shield, so they won't get a missile block chance. They tend to have more charge bonus when they're two-handed and more damage. Be it that they have a spear, they also tend to have better melee defense than their comparable melee attack. It's important to take this into account as you're selecting this unit. Then you have Dardanian... What am I saying Dardanian defenders? I'm talking about the damn weapons, dude. Chill. So you have club units. Club units tend to have really high damage. The thing about it, though, is that they have high damage, but not necessarily that many bonuses against... Or actually, I'm not even sure they have any bonuses against other infantry, and not as high AP damage as the weapon I haven't talked about yet, which is axes. So how you can think of them is pounders. They'll take off a lot of HP off of units, but as units get more armor and, become higher tier, they could potentially not trade as well with them unless you get elite clubs, which are kind of rare in the game, and they do have better statistics to help them with their lower AP damage than other elite units. They also have the two-handed version of the club units, which help them have better offensive statistics than the shield variant. And finally, you have what are called the axe units. So you have axe and shield and two-handed axe. And axes are basically, they're the kings of AP damage. They'll just have a lot more AP damage than other weapon types. So they'll be able to cut through units a bit better. So that is really their key that makes them different. Having a shield, they'll have better defensive sustainability against missiles, and without the shield, they tend to have better offensive capabilities. Now, when it comes to terrain, it's important to talk about some very important things. So there's different types of terrain, and some of them are more advantageous to other units. Additionally, the terrain can affect units based on its entity size, aka large units or small units. You don't really see small units, you just see, you know, like heavy, medium, light units. The weight class is what gets affected. For example, if you look at the Cyclops, he's unique because he seems to not really be affected by his innate weight class or his large entity size. But when you look at the Minotaur, he's a heavy infantry unit, so he is affected like if he was an Aristea, which is a heavy infantry unit. Some units are bugged, like the Amazon Champions. They should have penalties based on them being chariots, but they're not. They have penalties based on them being large. And this goes with infantry and other units. You gotta really look at how they're affected by terrain, because there can be bugs in the game's implementation. And also, this is the best way for you to learn how different terrains work in this game and how different units are affected by it. There is a great video that Jarl of the Apian Way made, and I'll link it in the description for you to learn how terrain affects different units. And he really goes into details based upon heroes being on chariots or not, and other effects. For terrains, the shallow waters are basically the only terrain that is not good for light units. It's really good for heavy units. All the others are more beneficial towards the lighter units than the heavier units in the game. Important thing to note here, when you have a hero on a chariot, you're gonna notice that they're not affected in terrain like if they were chariot units. They're affected in terrain like they are large units. That means that, given that chariots are the units that are most negatively affected by terrain in the game, a hero on a chariot unit will not be as negatively affected on terrain as an actual chariot unit in the game. Okay, back to the data file, the data.pack file of the game. So, say that you are going through all the faction units in, multiplayer, and you're like, man, I really want to find out what units are best against other units. Which units have the most bonus against other units? Which units have the most AP damage, most base damage? What about which units have the fastest attack? Oh, where the hell is it? The fastest attack interval in the game. So you can go to the data.pack file, go to the DB folder, and then go all the way down to where this file is, the melee weapons table. Open this data file. And then once you're here, you're going to get a list of all the units and the heroes in the game, including epic heroes. And then you can get easy access via columns to all these different statistics of units in the game. And then if you go up and down, you can then look at the names corresponding to the values and be like, wow, Diomedes has really good AP damage. So does Penthesilea, Achilles, Cyclops, Minotaur. So they appear to be the highest units with AP damage. By looking at this, you can go through all of these important information and have a bit more access to understanding what units are best at what and what units are best at countering other units. Now, something to take into account when you play Troy is that units have precursor javelins, melee units. Now, if units are one on top of the other, or in the formations, it's very similar to missile units, meaning that they'll actually get blocked from shooting at the enemy. So let me show you this. Let's get a bit closer. And as I get closer, I should be able to shoot my precursor javelins. But as I get closer to the enemy, we're going to see that it's going to get blocked as I try to shoot him. So I might be in range already. Let me see. Not yet. Let's go here. Okay, he's shooting at me. But me, look at that. I'm getting obstructed most of the time. So I'm not being able to shoot my missiles towards the enemy. But if I actually move one of these units forward like this, now I'm not being blocked. Very important to take this into account as you try to get precursor javelins off, that you don't have units above each other. Right now, still the formations are one on top of each other, so I'm kind of preventing them from shooting. Now, something I want to talk about here is when you have a large unit on a hero, right? Watch what happens when it gets destroyed. He's now in combat, but he is still considered a large entity, even though he's no longer on the chariot. That's very important to take into account when you are in combat and you are facing off against something that has anti-large. if your commander's chariot is destroyed, you're essentially still a large entity once you become a melee unit on the ground. An assumption one might have about slinger units is that they all have loose formation, because you're gonna see a lot of them have it, but it's not the case that all of them has this loose formation that we talk about. So let me separate these units here. In the Amazon's roster, in this case Hippolyta, she has the Stone Slingers unit, right? Look at all this separation between the units, right? Pretty good. Then look at the shielded Stone Slingers. They are really closely grouped together. Now, if we go over to the enemy, right, and we look at Argiv Slingers and then Achaean Slingers, they have a lot of separation between the units. But then when we look at the armored Argiv Slingers, they tend to group up even more. So what this is saying is that it's not innately that all of them have this large amount of separation between each unit, what we would traditionally call loose formation. It appears that at the very least from this pattern, a small pattern, there's many factions in the game that we can see here, some of the elite or more elite of the slinger units tend to not necessarily have as much separation between each unit model. So it's not like all slinger units have such a large amount of separation between each unit model. So say you come into battle, right? And you're like, man, I really don't want to use this mount anymore. Like, why am I even using it for the battle? So you can actually press the toggle mount button, and this will actually remove the mount from the battle. You'll dismount, but note that it is a permanent dismount. So you cannot come back on the mount once it is gone. Note how the HP changed. It was actually at 7100 before she dismounted. Now it's at 6300. But now the mount is gone, and now you can actually proceed onwards in the battle. Something to keep track of here is that when you have a missile chariot and you try to move forward on a siege settlement, you can't actually attack it. And when you're on these missile based mounts, you don't have the melee button available. Now, if you want to bypass this, right, because right now, how the hell are you going to attack the settlement? You really can't do anything here. Toggle fire at will does not work. That's not going to help you fix it. The only thing that can fix it is dismounting. You just keep track of this and be careful, because this also happens when you have a horse mount. But now that I'm dismounted, I can do the toggle melee button and be able to proceed to attack the settlement. Now, you might have seen on a previous tip about the HP of a archer trickster on a mount. Before going into combat, the large archer chariot. Now, when I was in the battle, you might have noticed that the HP was 7100 while I was mounted. But then when I dismounted, it actually became about 6300. So the total HP that you see here in the preview screen is the HP of you mounted and the HP of you unmounted. How mounts work in this game is that you start the battle on the mount, and then once the enemy takes off all the HP of the mount while you're on it, then your mount gets destroyed and now you have the remaining HP available. In that case, it was 6330. So that's important to keep track of as you face off against enemies that potentially are mounted in battle. Now, here's an advantage. This is a archer trickster Amazon hero, and she is on a warhorse, I believe, mount, and she has a total HP of 15,000. Now, from what we see here, she does not get dismounted. When you see this HP here, there's no toggle mount option, so this mount does not get destroyed. She is always on this little horsey. Note though that unlike being on that missile based chariot as a mount, you can actually do the toggle mount or the toggle melee button here and attack the gate wall without having to dismount and permanently lose your mount before battle. This is an advantage of having the horse as a mount versus the chariot. Now, when you have a melee chariot, like we see Penthesilea here on, it works different than a missile chariot mount. Talking about mounts here. So a melee chariot mount actually has innately the toggle melee button enabled, unlike the missile chariot mount that does not have the melee button. You can only shoot. So what we can do here is actually attack the gate, which you cannot do when you have a missile chariot mount. The only way that you can do an attack order on a siege gate with a missile chariot mount is if you toggle dismount, and then you can attack the... So here I want to talk about how archer heroes work in this game. We're gonna work with Mr. Odysseus, and we're gonna shoot at this unit of swordsmen. Now, this unit of swordsmen has less than 100 HP per unit model. I should be able to inflict some pretty good damage on them. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in slow-mo here, and just look at how he hits units. Now notice that one single missile did collateral damage across multiple unit models, and I think he's only fired one volley and was able to take out 5 unit models. So what we can decipher from this is that a missile shot from a archer hero is basically like a laser in terms that it goes through the first unit, and appears to hit multiple. So their 3 unit models died in that volley that just came out. Now, units in this game also have precursor javelins, melee units, right? So it's a couple of volleys that you can utilize to shoot at the enemy. Now, for example, this unit here has 2 ammunition per unit model, and each of them has 95 range and missile damage 16. So what you can do here is you can just make sure that all your individual unit models actually shoot and hit the enemy, right? And you can see there, it's not exactly 50%. It seems that not all of the unit models were able to shoot off that first ammunition shot when they shot towards this unit. So now there's still another volley, and here you can see the majority of the unit models utilizing their second volley, and now we should be running out of all of the extra ammunition we have left. It's only 1 here because it's less than 50% of the total magnitude, which is just ammunition. Now I want to talk about how chariots work in this game. So this is a heavy chariot unit, and I'm going to be charging another heavy unit. Because of the mass being similar in terms of name, not exactly the mass of each of these individual units, when I try to charge the champions of Troy, I potentially will get stuck. What the hell am I saying? Stuck like that. You see that? It's like basically hitting a juggernaut, and I'm basically stuck in the charge. And because the mass difference is not that high, my charge on this unit was not that strong. So now my reinforced chariot is losing in combat and now stuck in a very precarious situation, because right now I basically hit a brick wall, and if I try to pull back, right, I'm not going to be doing that much damage, or I'm going to be hitting or getting hit pretty hard, because chariots have a very slow turn time in the game. Sure, I have the game on slow, so that doesn't help to visualize it, but here, look at this. I'm trying to pull away, but it's like mission impossible right now, because I am stuck with something that has very high mass. So some of these chariots are stuck in a very bad situation, and I didn't do that much damage to the unit. Now right now, as I'm pulling away, it seems that I'm hitting some unit models. There's a bit of HP losses at the very least there. Now I want to do a little showcase here of a big mass difference between a chariot unit and a unit that is basically lightweight. So I'm just going to take this unit and just charge him head on. I'm gonna even forget about the hero. He might get in the way. But watch this. Compared to charging a very heavy unit, as I charge these Trojan warriors, it's basically like I'm not gonna get stopped that much. It's gonna be like a steamroll. So you see that right there? When I charged the unit of, I think, Champions of Troy, I basically got stuck on the initial charge. I didn't pull through that many units and therefore damage more unit models. Here though, it is a curb stomp of splash damage hitting the entirety of this unit, with all these chariots plowing through and hitting everything they can right now. And as the chariots keep moving, more of these unit models are getting hit. So right now, the attack animations are moving around for all these guys, and you see how they pluck multiple unit models as they use their attack animations. As they're charging through the unit, it's just plucking through multiple unit models. Because of the mass difference, I don't get stuck in front of 1 to 2 unit models, and therefore decrease the damage potential that chariot does. Additionally, because there is this mass difference, it is easier for the chariot to pull through, versus when I'm charging a heavy unit, it's like I'm basically stuck on that wall and trying to get away from it as much as possible. Now, something to keep track of in terms of chariots and how they perform is that when they are trying to turn, around, they turn really slowly. So that could be a detriment if, for example, when they charge a heavy unit and they're like, oh crap, I just charged a brick wall, I have to get out of here. Well, as you try to turn around and get out of that engagement, you're gonna turn so slowly that heavy unit is gonna inflict a lot of casualties on you. That's very important to try to keep track of. Additionally, chariots suffer immensely from terrain. You put them in mud, good luck. They're basically gonna move like a snail. So they do have their weaknesses, especially if they get into a bad engagement. But if they go against a lighter unit than them in weight, they're gonna inflict a lot of potential casualties. Now, when it comes to tower range, the main towers by the gates have the same range as the towers on the sides, the smaller towers. Now, when you have stock units for a siege battle, you're going to notice that as you move them into the range of the towers or the tower firing arc, as you get closer, the unit is going to get discovered. And that sucks because then it's easy for the unit to then be recognized. Like right there, you see that? The unit got recognized or found, so now it's getting shot. The only time that it can actually go back to stock, let me see. Damn, I'm moving kind of slow. The only time that it will come back out of here and then actually not be seen again is getting out of the firing range of the unit. So now we are hidden again because the stock is active. So the moment you get within a certain range of the tower, you're going to get discovered with a stock unit. And only after getting out of its range will you be able to be hidden again as long as there isn't any enemy nearby. First off, when you do night battles, you cause enemy to have a -5 penalty to morale, which is pretty big. But then look at this. The range of this tower, I'm telling you, like normally it's all the way out here. But here, look how short it is. And this also includes the gatehouses. Really good to notice this and keep track of it, because this lets you know that you might have more openings to attack from between towers. So for example, stock units could get by without being noticed. There might be a bit too tight here as well. I think they made it really tight for the Siege of Troy, but there are smaller maps or different maps in the campaign. Oh, here's an opening between these two towers where you could just grab these two units and just sneak them in. Well, the battle already started, but you get the point. You have enough spacing to be between towers and get the units within the settlement with stock to do as you please. Now, when you're shot by missile units, you know that you're hit by -4 morale from missiles. It's called under missiles, I believe. Now, when you get shot by the towers, you're going to notice that this unit's getting shot by the towers, but you don't get hit by the under missiles penalty. So just keep track of that. So the towers don't get that advantage of applying -4 morale, potentially allowing you to not really break as fast, even though it's just -4. But you do still get hit by the towers, which are little mini missiles or laser missiles. That makes more sense. So just keep track of this relevant difference between missiles and towers. Now, something relevant to notice is when you do night battles and these custom battles is that both you, the attacker, and the defender have the penalty of -5 for unprepared for night battle. I think what this is trying to determine is like, hey, this is not like in campaign where one side gets to pick that the night battle is gonna happen. Here, both players have to decide, or player and AI have to decide that, hey, we are gonna do this night battle. So therefore, both are gonna be penalized with the morale penalty of playing in a night battle. Now, when you're playing Troy, it is important to take into account how the heck do I tell height in the game? Like if I look at the map, right? How do I tell where there's a lot of height and there isn't, where there is depth? So if you look on the bottom right on the map, there's parts where it's a lighter shade of brown, tan-ish, where it looks, you know, a little bit brighter, while some areas are darker. So if we go over here to this really bright area, you'll notice that this area over here is a really bright spot in the map. That's because it's taller. Now, this area over here, though, it's dark, completely dark in my eyes here because it's not discovered. But if I go all the way over here, if you see the terrain is getting taller and taller and taller, and the terrain on the bottom right is looking lighter and lighter and lighter in color. Now, something important to talk about is General's aura and the leadership effect it has on a unit. Now, you see this unit, it has an aura around it. Let's see this blue circumference around him. Now, its effect actually extends past the circumference at a gradual magnitude decrease, depending on how far the unit is from the general. Right now, this unit has 56 morale, right? You see it here. It has 50 from base value and 6 from flank secure. I'm going to move him closer towards this unit. So I want you to follow two things. Hell, is he even moving? Yeah, we're going to follow two things. We're going to see if there's a new parameter here below flank secure as he gets closer, and then look at how far away he is as the leadership buff is applied, depending on how close the general is, the hero is, to the unit. So, man, I shouldn't have done this in slow-mo. This is like way too slow. So anyways, we'll see it in a little bit. I just want to make sure we capture it in real... There we go. So it updated by 1. So it probably was maybe around here. Can't really see it because I already when I pressed pause, it kind of went to play speed. So somewhere around this distance, maybe like, I don't know, a couple meters away, the leadership actually went up by 1 with a hero nearby. Now I'm going to keep moving him forward or closer towards the unit, right? There. And if we look at the leadership, right, it's still at 1. Oh, and it updated to 2. Look how close the circumference is to the unit. And then as he keeps getting closer, it's now at 3. So the unit is not necessarily within the circumference, but the hero nearby bonus is applying, and it'll stay applied with how close he is getting to the unit. So look at this here. I'm grabbing the wrong person. There. So now the unit is definitely within the circumference, pretty much within it. And the leadership buff is at 3. So depending how close your unit is to the general's aura of the hero, you're gonna get a hero nearby leadership buff of up to +3, as you see here. Something important to talk about in battles in terms of heroes is something called rage. Rage is this bar here. There's a description to it. Heroes gain rage when fighting. Each battle ability requires an amount of rage to be used. So as you can see here, I am fighting because I just had a huge ass boulder tossed my way. I tried to toss it over to him. My rage actually went down, but it wasn't because of the boulder toss. It's because I actually was not fighting anymore. You see this icon here, the taking fire icon? If it disappears, the rage should also go down, showcasing that if I don't have anything hitting me or being in melee, I'm no longer going to be generating rage. So basically, I must be in constant warfare in order to generate rage. The important thing about rage is that as you are doing in rage, you will gain enough to potentially use abilities. Now, I'm in a divine challenge, so I really can't utilize any skills because of the divine challenge ability. But as rage goes up, bam, I can now utilize the rage that I've built through battle to utilize abilities that cause rage. For example, this one, Pulverize, costs 50 rage to utilize. You can see the rage cost on the 3rd row here below duration and target. Now I have access to other ones. I can do Unbreakable and Mortar and get a lot more, and get these Herculean Resolve bonuses for 25 seconds. Sure, I got my booty kicked, but the purpose here is to show that rage is gained as long as you are in combat. And then as you generate rage up to 100, you can then utilize abilities in battle that cost rage. Note that the moment that you exit melee or missile fire, then you will wait like a split second or like a second or two, and then your rage is just gonna drop super fast. Now, if you're looking for all the rates at which rage goes up or it potentially goes down once you're out of combat, there is a section in this KV rules tables data folder that has all of these rage parameters that can be investigated to know just how fast or how slow you can generate rage while you are in battle. Now, it is time to talk about probably the most important ability in Troy, or the highlight ability of Troy. It's called Aristea. Aristea, probably said that wrong, is basically something based off of Aristea points. And Aristea points is like this orange line that increases over your character's unit card at the top. Once it reaches to the very top of the circle that's up here, you can utilize the Aristea on the bottom left, this ability here that you see really big. It lasts 60 seconds, the effect is on oneself, it can only be used once. It removes the cooldown from abilities, so you can reuse them all as long as, if they require rage, you have enough rage to use them. Additionally, you gain HP per second of 25, you get 20% more armor, 30% more melee attack, you freeze your stamina so you will potentially not, go down in fatigue, and you'll be unbreakable, which is all really good. The important thing about the unbreakable is that since the ability lasts 60 seconds, you're unbreakable for 60 seconds. So there's not a chance that you'll rout or shatter. The only time that you'll end combat is if you manually retreat, or if you basically lose all your HP. So I'm gonna fast forward here to start this engagement so you can see the Aristea going up. Aristea goes up based upon utilizing battle abilities and generating rage. As I generate rage, it's gonna increase slowly but surely, and as I use abilities, I'm also gonna be gaining Aristea. You're gonna see like an orange line go up here. So let's actually go in combat here. Where the hell's myself? There we go. Okay, so there we're fighting each other. This ability basically gives me more stat boost, and it increases rage. you really don't see the rage increase that much. It's like a very slow increase. But when I use abilities, bam, there you go. A ton of them activate, or my Aristea goes up really fast. Note that now that I'm in combat, it's just basically slowed down because I'm just generating the rage. I've generated it and it doesn't go down anymore. So I'm not generating any more Aristea from rage. Now I'm just depending on these abilities coming back down from cooldown so I can then utilize them again and then be potentially getting the Aristea. Now I'm probably going to lose this. My booty just got kicked. But the point here is once you generate enough Aristea, the button at the bottom left will activate and then you can use it and gain all those benefits that I've mentioned. A key difference between Rage and Aristea is that Rage, if you exit combat, Rage actually goes back down. But Aristea, once you've gained it, it does not decrease from the magnitude that it is at. I'm talking about the Aristea points, which is the orange line as it's going up. The Aristea points do not go down. Now, as for Aristea, there's a bit more advanced tips that can be talked about it. So Aristea, right, is gained as Rage is earned, and it seems that it's about 0.33 per Rage earned, and the max cap of Aristea is 350. So I believe that whenever Aristea is filled, and you can therefore, Aristea points are filled, and therefore you can use the Aristea ability, that's at a magnitude of 350. So every single time you generate Rage in combat, you're going to gain 0.33. Now, whenever you use Rage in combat, for every single Rage magnitude that you utilize, every single, one that you utilize, you're going to gain 0.5 Aristea. So you gain more Aristea when you spend Rage than when you earn it. And then it shows here the Aristea per percentage allies lost. I don't know what the hell that means. Something very important to note here is that these buttons, or like toggle fire at will, skirmish mode, and guard mode, one of them actually counts as a command here. If you press halt, you're going to notice that one of these is actually going to turn off. Boom. Fire at will turns off. So it's important to keep track of this in case you do have fire at will turned on and then you press the halt key for any reason. You might have to remember, or you will have to remember, to turn on toggle fire at will. This is tested on Hippolyta on her archer, light archer horse, I think it's called, the mount, the first one you can select. I don't think this is something that happens on chariot heroes. It might be, but just keep track of this at the very least in this hero setup scenario like the one I'm showcasing here. So for battles, especially with like missile heroes, there must be something to be said. Actually, just missile units in general. Whenever you have the skirmish mode ability on, you're going to notice that there's going to be a moment where you cannot take control of your hero. If you see right here, I'm actually right-clicking at this moment, and my hero is not taking my attack order or my command order. Now, if I right-click now, I can actually do it. The question is, how did that happen? Why couldn't I actually stop the movement of my hero as I tried to click? So right now, as I got really close to this hero, my skirmish mode turned on. And now you can see that once skirmish mode turns on and the hero / unit automatically tries to run away, she can't, or he can't, because the skirmish mode turned on, and I gotta wait for it to turn off in order for my hero to be able to be microed again. So if you're able to manage your micro really well, and don't really forget about where your units are and whatnot, it's best to try to keep skirmish mode off so you yourself manage attack orders and you potentially don't run into a situation where skirmish mode causes your unit to go to a place like right here where you don't want your unit to end up cornered and you have no control over what the heck is going on. Like right here, look at this. What the heck? Where's she gonna go? Oh, okay. And there she went. Boom, she got caught. Oh, that's the negative of skirmish mode. Something important about missile heroes that you can see here is as Odysseus is shooting at this missile hero, there is a chance that when he shoots, the hero is going to get staggered and actually fall to the ground. I'm going to see if I can actually pull this off. Run, Cyclops, run! Come on, fool! Ah, man, shit! Okay, dude, you can't just like miss every shot now. I'm trying to showcase what you can do. Alright, and here, let's see if he hits him. Come on, there you go. What the hell, you don't got visibility on the guy? Come on, man. Shoot the man. There you go. There we go. Perfect. So you saw that? how he just fell? That is one of the advantages of archer heroes. They can cause a, well, I think I would call it a stagger on the enemy hero and knock him down. Potentially by knocking him down, you could charge him with another unit and then therefore get the charge bonus on him, and he won't be able to get it on you as he stands up and is just straight going into the melee attack animations. Now, in terms of height in this game, and it's actually a very unique thing to be looking at, you can even be super low and obstructed in the path that you shoot another unit, but you can still shoot at it. And that is absolutely crazy, and I absolutely love that about the game. Now, when we talk about flanks not being secured, you know, the game of Troy is all about morale, debuff stacking, and flanking. That's like the primary thing you really want to focus on. So if you just put a unit around another unit, like just towards its side or its back, it's going to lose its flank secure buff of +6, and it'll get something called exposed flanks that'll be a -3 penalty. So even getting a unit nearby another unit will therefore cause the flank secure to be gone and get a -3 penalty, meaning that you'll get a net 9 loss to morale whenever the flank is no longer secured. Now, when a unit goes into alt attack mode, which is one of the main features of units in a Total War Saga Troy, you're going to notice that the unit statistics change overall. One important note though is that the weapon damage does increase, but the AP damage does not. So if we look at the AP damage here, before I switch to two-handed melee or weapon, the AP damage right now is 12. Once I do this change and we see the unit statistics change, there we go. Let's look over here, and our AP damage is still 12, but we did gain a total of 18 weapon damage that went to the normal weapon damage. We also gained a lot more things like extra speed 15%, 12 melee attack, 16 charge bonus, -20 melee defense, and -60 to missile parry with shield. Now, this is all very nice, and it also has rare shield defense, meaning that the unit will potentially have missile block chance from behind it. So when you have height of one unit over another, for example, when you put a missile unit on the walls and it shoots down a unit below it, you have a height difference. That height difference actually applies a coefficient to both melee damage and missile damage of units. Looking at this, depending whatever that height difference is, there's like a max amount, you will actually get a 30% multiplier to your melee damage and to your missile damage, therefore allowing you to do 30% more damage both once you make contact and are able to hit the unit, and also once you make contact and are able to hit the unit in melee and in missile. Now, in this game, damage resistance does not get that high, but if you ever were able, down the line when DLCs come out, expansions come out, damage resistance can keep getting stacked and stacked and stacked. The maximum damage resistance or ward save in the game is up to 90%. When a unit routes, it could be fatigued, it could be, you know, at a really low fatigue level, but there are specific modifiers to melee defense and speed that appear to be constant according to the tables here when a unit is routing. It shows here that its melee defense will go down by 20% and its speed will go down by 30%, meaning that the unit won't be as fast and it'll be more probable that it'll get hit, therefore allowing you to inflict casualties on it and get closer to it as it is routing. Now, when it comes to attacking gates, some units and heroes are better at attacking them because they will damage the gates faster. Here's one example with the Giant Vanguard. They actually have a tooltip that says good versus gates. Some epic heroes actually attack gates faster, like for example Ajax. Now, you might think that there are no artillery units in Troy, right? And you're like, okay, so I guess there's no artillery effect on morale. But watch this. God damn, this dude just missed that rock. Oh my goodness. But if we look at morale, you see that they're attacked by artillery -8. Those boulder throws that some heroes and units are able to do inflict what's called attack by artillery, which is a pretty big moral debuff. So sure, the enemy unit was not able to hit me with that boulder because Ajax's boulder sucks, but it was able to inflict a -8 penalty to morale, which is absolutely big to go up against. Now, it is important to talk about how guard mode works. So say that you have a unit with guard mode and one without it. When a unit has guard mode and is engaged against a unit, it will stay attacking that unit until the unit that is being attacked decides to not engage anymore in combat, be it by retreating, manually, or by routing per se. So we're going to take this engagement here. There are two units here that I want to look at. We're gonna look at this engagement and this one. My Daughters of Ares should win both engagements, but what will happen here is that one of them, the one that's on the right, will not chase after the other unit after it retreats, while this one will actually, let me see, did I click the right one? Yeah, well, this one will still keep chasing the unit that is routing. You see how it's still killing the unit as it is still routing? It is eliminating the remaining unit models. But on this side, the unit stayed put. So now the Ajax as well is able to retreat and actually come back to the battlefield. Now, in terms of, what happens in multiplayer battles and how this can be useful to you, is some really tricky players that know how valuable flanking is in the game will actually engage you in combat, right? And then they'll pull back their unit. And since you don't have guard mode, your unit will stay chasing the enemy's unit as it is pulling back. And then what they'll do is they'll get you in a less favorable position so then they can flank you on the sides or the rear to apply the morale and melee defense debuffs to really cause your unit to be in a very detrimental situation. So what I'd say is you should try to put guard mode on if you think that there's a chance the enemy will pull back manually, so you can prevent yourself from being caught in a precarious situation, or turn on guard mode if you don't want your units to be getting out of the position that they're in. I think I just repeated both things at the same time with different words, but I think you get the memo. Now, something important that happens in battles is, say you give an attack order to another unit, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get to that unit, have an attack order, I won't stop moving as I try to get towards it. Now, something that can happen is, if the unit becomes invisible, right? Or hidden, wrong word, not invisible. Then your attack order is gone. So try to be very careful with that and basically keep track of the arrows of a unit as they're trying to move, right? Because it'll be red. The moment that you don't see the red arrow or a unit that you have an attack order to, it means that it possibly is not moving anymore. Two other ways that you can look at it is, if you're not hidden, you'll see the running icon on your character stops moving. Well, check them out. And at the bottom, you can definitely see the running icon or walking, and you'll know if you're no longer chasing after a unit that you had an attack order on. Now, when you try to use abilities in combat, you're gonna notice that it'll take like a second. Actually, I'm not sure what the magnitude is in time, but there'll be something like it's like a wind-up time, if that's the correct term, where the ability doesn't just activate automatically. It takes just a bit of time for it to activate. So I'm gonna click this rallying cry, and you see here that it has like 1 second. Oh, that's the wind-up time. Oh, there's the timer. And it has 1 second there. I'm gonna go to slow-mo, and then watch. 1 second later, boom, now the ability is active. Something very important to talk about in Troy, one of its most important aspects, is what flanking attack improved does in the game. It's a pretty big buff to actually utilize. So I'm gonna try to engage these units from their exact flank with 2 units that are either with flanking attack improved or with no flanking attack improvement, like this one. So you're gonna see the enemy's morale. See, right now it's at 61 and its melee defense is at 50. Now I want you to look at the magnitudes as I'm charging into these units. So one of them that I'm using has flanking attack improved, the other one doesn't. The one on the right doesn't. Let's look at the one on the right and one on the left. So their morale has gone down a little bit because of flanks exposed and enemy attack nearby. But watch this. You're gonna see a massive hit to morale. Look at that. Minus 20 attacked in the rear. There was a momentary larger morale debuff, probably from the charge. But look at that. Minus 20 from attack in the rear. And the melee defense 5. For this unit though, it is still getting hit by the attack in the rear penalty. That is still existing even without the flanking attack improved. But the melee defense debuff is not as steep. So you can see the comparison right here in terms of the morale between these 2 units. How they are both minus 20, so the flanking attack improved doesn't necessarily affect that. But the melee defense gets completely clobbered. One being at 5 and the other being at 16. Now this is a test of what happens when you take a unit that has flanking defense improved and charge it with a unit that has flanking attack improved. So if we look at this, they are being attacked from the flank, so there is still a penalty to their overall melee defense here from what we can see here at 23. This unit here has the same penalty. Now if I take out these units from this engagement, the flanking defense improved units, let's see how their melee defense goes. It's still 23, goes up to 28. So it's not like it automatically completely takes it out. It's like it's saying it reduces the bonus effects. So yes, while it doesn't drop like insane magnitude, in melee defense, like we saw before, it'll at least drop to a magnitude that is, you know, manageable. Now, there's actually another level to flanking defense, and it's called immune to flanking. For example, renowned Kokesh fighters have immune to flanking here, which says that it removes all bonuses from the attacker for attacking this unit from the side or behind. So we're gonna do this here. We're gonna attack this unit and attack it from the side and look at its morale and its flanking defense. So now that we've engaged and we look at the morale here, it is attacked in flank. So the penalty to being attacked in the flank is still there to the morale. But if we look at melee defense, the melee defense does not go down at all. In the flanking defense improved testing, we noticed that the actual melee defense still decreased for a unit that has flanking defense improved. So how fear works is that it applies a -8 penalty to leadership of units around the unit that causes fear. So right now, if we look, this unit has 53 morale. There's no -8 penalty from being frightened. That's the fear effect. But if we get this unit just a tiny bit closer to them, like right here perhaps, just a tiny bit more, and drop it a little bit more. Oh, we should be getting there. There we go. 42. Ooh. Hold on. What the hell? There we go. 42. So it shows here that the enemy now it has a frightened by enemy unit of -8. And it appears also that since the unit is pretty close to its flank, it's now getting the exposed flanked leadership penalty. So by being this close to the enemy, we can cause the fear penalty to occur. Now, what are the best ways to cause a unit to rout in the game? So you gotta stack a lot of things to make sure the morale drops below a certain threshold for long enough to it to actually rout. As you can see here, I'm just stacking a lot of penalties at this time. I did some precursor javelins from the audacious midnight runners. I have fear causing them a morale debuff of -8 on the unit. It is attacked in the flank, and now melee contact from the units making contact on it, damage sustained from HP losses, along with losing currently in the battle, stronger enemies nearby. And because the morale was so low for so long, once it's below a certain threshold, I've read here and there that it could be 13 the magnitude. When a unit with terror charges at a unit during its charge interval, which is I think 18 seconds in Troy, it has a potential when it strikes the enemy unit and its morale is below that threshold to make it rout. So this unit, its morale was already pretty damn low. And when the Cyclops came into the picture, it just was like, I'm gonna clobber you to death, man, I'm sorry. And by doing that attack on the unit, it actually was able to potentially cause the terror to kick in. The unit now is routing, and it's gonna come back to the battlefield once it rallies back. Now, you might be wondering, how the heck do you counter fear in this game? So we know that when a unit with fear is near other units, within a certain range, it's gonna apply a -8 penalty to leadership or morale. Now, when you have a unit with what's called Encourage, like Champions of Troy that we see here, Encourage provides a morale bonus to nearby allies, and it is actually +8, so it net cancels what you lose from fear. There is something you gotta take into account though. Generals provide a +3 up to a +3 morale from the general's aura radius. Note that in campaign that could be higher. So Encourage here states, hey, units within the range of both the hero's aura and an encouraging unit will receive the larger bonus of the two units. So while yes, you do gain +8 from Encouraged by a nearby unit, until this encouraged unit moves away from this other unit and the +8 is no longer applied, the general's aura leadership buff is not applied. So you don't necessarily have to keep the hero nearby this unit because it's not getting the leadership buff that it would get if it was not encouraged. Now, encouraged is what you would call a hard AoE counter. Maybe it's soft. I don't know, whatever. It's a counter in AoE fashion to fear, so you don't get hit by that fear penalty of -8 when a unit that causes fear is nearby you or units near you. But if you want a actual hard counter, yeah, there we go, for your own unit, so fear and terror do not cause any effect on your unit, you can get a unit that has immune to psychology, and that way fear and terror, the effects are not applied to this unit. So just keep track of this. Encourage will help on an AoE basis with morale, so that could counter fear units nearby. and immune psychology will help a single unit that has this ability be immune to both fear and terror. Now, there is actually healing in this game. You know, heroes can have abilities that generated actively and passively, but units can also have battlefield healing, and I'm talking just about basic melee units in Troy before the Mythos DLC. It is an ability, a passive one, called battlefield healing. So when a unit is outside of combat, the unit models of the unit are able to replenish their hit points over time. Note that if the unit has lost unit models in combat, the unit models do not come back. So you can only regenerate the existing HP of the unit models of the unit that are still alive. Now, it is important to note whenever a unit has expendable, it is something that is very tricky to utilize, especially if you have more than one unit with expendable. So say that you have 2 expendable units and a friendly unit that is expendable decides to route, you're gonna see that you could potentially have like a mass routing chain across all your expendable units in a battle. You must be very careful with this if you try to get too many units with this passive ability. Is it passive? It's just an ability. With this ability across all of these units. Now, there's an important combination of abilities that are related to hiding that we must talk about for missile units. So, Stalk is found in melee units too, but for missile units, right, just like the melee units, a unit can move, in any terrain hidden. Now, you can combine that in a deadly combination with Snipe. Snipe causes the unit to shoot and remain hidden while firing. Combine that with Stalk means that the unit is already hiding in any terrain, and while it's not visible, it can shoot, and the enemy will have to get close to them in order to see them. Really useful against the AI because you can just keep shooting pot shots at the enemy and they won't see where it's coming from. Extremely good to use these units to hit the enemy from the side where the missile block chance is not taking away the probability of hitting the unit. Then you have an additional effect. You combine Stalk with Snipe with Unspottable. What Unspottable does, like mentioned before, is it decreases the range that an enemy unit can spot you because they have to get really close to you to see where you are. And since you already have Stalk, look how crazy this is. You get close to the enemy, right? In range that you can shoot them, you stop moving. And then if you stop moving, the enemy could potentially come closer to you while you're shooting at them, but they'll really have to get a lot closer to spot you in order to know where the hell the missile fire is coming from. Now, there are other abilities in the game that came with the Amazon's DLC that are unique to these factions, and you don't really see them across the other factions in the game. So for example, this unit, which I'm not even going to try saying its name, it's a horse unit, the elite of the elite of Hippo, and the unit has an ability called To the Last, which is constant, and to itself, it gives plus 10 melee attack and plus 10 melee defense, but only after the unit's HP is below 50%. Basically like, yo, if we're dying, let's actually make sure we are more probable to hit and less probable to get hit so we can last longer in combat. Then the unit has also Strider. So Strider can be found as well in Warhammer, and it's a pretty neat passive ability that it removes the speed and combat penalties caused by terrain. Those are ignored by this unit. Now, for a large unit, that is very important because large units are affected by the different terrains like mud. So you could potentially be able to maneuver through mud to potentially do a flank or attack another unit in it without being so heavily affected by the penalties. There are other units that have other unique abilities. So for example, this unit of Aristomachoi, that's easier to say at least, has a unit called an ability called Relentless. It is constant and it gives a unit immune to psychology and disciplined. It's kind of interesting that it's an ability and it instead of just being the two separated and just being two separate abilities that the unit has. But I have noticed that it is rare to find units with disciplined in Troy. Unless my eyes are deceiving me, I just can't find that many units with disciplined. So discipline is a very interesting ability, also found in Warhammer, that it basically causes a unit to not really suffer morale penalties when the hero dies. And that is pretty good because sometimes when the hero dies, if your unit has pretty low morale, there's a chance that it could rout if that little magnitude difference or any small magnitude difference or anything bigger than that in magnitude affects the unit. Now, it also has more chances to rally after routing, so it takes longer for it to actually chatter. Now, there's actually some other interesting ones like Red Mist. Red Mist is pretty awesome. Before a unit has killed 100 or more enemies, it has Perfect Vigor. Now, what this means is, say that you're gonna go off against a unit that has good defensive capabilities, but you're able to get that unit to be more fatigued, so its combat capabilities start to decrease. Well, you potentially don't have to take out that many unit models if it's a unit with not that many unit models as a whole. So you could utilize this unit to have Perfect Vigor and engage with that unit to potentially do very well against it, and have Perfect Vigor last a long time because it won't necessarily be killing that many units before this ability gets disabled. There's actually some other ones. Let me see if I find it here. Oh, Inspire to the Last. So some abilities can be both for yourself, which is just to the last, and then you have Inspire to the Last, which means that you can then utilize it on an ally. You can find this on the to the last ability in the Coordinates, if that's how you say it, and then you can actually utilize it for another ability that is found on the missile units, on some of them, or Hippo's faction at least. These units have Fear Resolve, which for themselves gives some additional good combat stats, but then they can use it on another unit that potentially could be a good offensive melee unit, giving it +8 weapon damage, +12 melee attack, +8 charge bonus, and immune to psychology. These are great little bonuses that you can give to another unit, especially like a cav unit, to make it really do well in combat. And of course, it'll be disabled after the hit points are less than 50% or the duration finishes, which is 60 seconds. There's also this kind of like detrimental ability that you have. It's called Worry, and the lower tier infantry units of Hippo and Enthi, I believe, they suffer from this ability that what it does is these units have -10 melee attack and -10 morale if there are no routing units nearby. So what this tells me from reading this right is you better hope you have great missile units, great calves, stuff around these units, or you simply utilize them for chasing routing units off so they can basically focus themselves at their very low cost to just make sure that units don't rally back to the battlefield. Now, there are variations to two abilities that actually help you get more charge bonus so you can inflict more damage upon your initial engagement with a unit. One of them is called Spread and Charge. It is found on the Amazon's roster, and it gives +30% charge bonus at a cost of -15% to melee defense. And basically, it'll be active until you basically are climbing, manning equipment, or on a platform, so it doesn't have like a duration that you can use it. But then you have another one that the icon might be similar, and you might be like, oh, they're the same. Well, not exactly. This one is called Reckless Charge. It is found on the Salamis roster at the very least. It lasts for 45 seconds. Once those 45 seconds are done, then you won't get these bonuses anymore or penalties. This one gives, these bonuses are insane, and the penalty as well is steeper. You get +35% speed, +65% charge bonus, and -60% to melee defense. So if you use this unit for flanking purposes, you're going to be this is a very devastating unit to have. Now, there are even more abilities that you can find in the Amazon roster, like Eager for Blood, which gives +10 morale and +8 melee attack to the unit, but it disables if there are routing friends nearby. So this unit that has this would be really good if it's kind of soloing, or it's around other unbreakable units, so there's no routing potential nearby it. Now, there is the horsewoman that have skittish horses, and what this means is, hey, if my HP of this unit, right, the HP of this unit is less than 50%, it's gonna get hit by -30% speed, which is pretty bad, especially because probably when that HP is that low, you're probably gonna be fatigued, so you're gonna have an additional penalty to speed, making you move really slow. And then we have Life of Bronze. So this unit does 10% more damage until it has killed 200 or more enemies, basically saying like, hey, we're using bronze, so it'll be good for a bit, but after a while, ding ding ding, not really gonna do that much damage anymore. Now, it is important to talk about something called Discouraged. It is a morale penalty of -10 that some missile units in the game have, and it lasts for 10 seconds. Absolutely phenomenal to utilize, because then this combines with the -4 morale penalty that a unit gets hit by when it's under fire from missiles. Now, continuing after that, there is this passive ability here called Serenaded Edges. it says here that this lowers morale of a unit. Now that's fine and dandy and all, right? And you might be like, okay, so that means that I could stack serrated edges with discouraged to get even more morale debuff stacking on a unit. So we're gonna test that out here. We're gonna shoot on one of these Ajax's walls with the unit that has serrated edges, and look at its morale right now. So it has a morale of 79. I'm gonna start shooting it now, and then let's look how much it drops. The unit has serrated edges, and looking at this right now, it does not appear to be getting hit by serrated edges, discouraged by abilities from discouraged from the missile, and under fires across every unit. Now this unit is gonna shoot at Ajax. These huntresses do not have serrated edges, and we should see similar magnitude drops of -10 and -4 from under missile fire and discouraged by ability. What this is showing me here is that if serrated edges is supposed to do anything, at this moment it appears that it does not do anything to lower morale. So there is a very important ability that we can find in, for example, Warhammer 2, that when you start playing Troy, you might be like, wait, where the hell is this? So it is Expert Charge Defense. Now, there's only one faction in the game that actually has Expert Charge Defense, unless I didn't find it in any other faction by accident. So if we look, for example, at Ajax's wall, they actually have Expert Charge Defense. So the benefit of this is if the unit's not moving right, it's bracing, the unit negates the charge bonus of any attacker. So whatever the charge bonus is, right, say it's 20 like we see for example for this unit, that won't be applied to the melee attack and to the damage when the unit charges you. So you can potentially decrease the initial first damage for various seconds that a unit can do to you if you are braced when they charge you. Note that this should be from the front of the unit alone, if my understanding of it is correct. You can actually see here that even lower tier unit in this roster like Island Spearmen have Expert Charge Defense. So it could be useful, you know, in the game to utilize this early on in campaign, for example, just to eat up charge defense of armies or units that just have a lot of it. So just important for you to keep track of it if you're asking to yourself, where the hell is charge defense in this game? Now, when it comes to the Argos roster, a lot of the units in the roster have this passive ability called Ferocity. Now, whenever the unit has more than a 50% HP, it's gonna get plus 20% weapon damage and plus 20% to melee attack, meaning that if you focus on building your units to have as high melee attack as possible and have pretty good weapon damage, you can therefore multiply it even higher with these 20% multipliers as long as your HP does not drop that much. And we also have this other passive ability, which is huge to have. I mean, it's very rare to find a unit with it. One of the best units in the Argos roster has Strong Vigor, which means that the unit's stamina is less affected by fatiguing actions such as combat. So over time, its rate of decay of its stamina is gonna be slower than a traditional unit. So it's gonna take a longer time for it to go from fresh to active, or is it active? Yeah. From active to winded, etc, etc. So the Amazon Hyper Volley ability, or Volley, what do I keep saying hyper? So the Volley ability, you might be thinking, oh man, you know, it might have like a good arc, you know, potentially when I shoot an enemy on a wall, I don't know, maybe you think that, I did. And you're like, yeah, let's do this. So you do this, the range increases to 200 meters, which is crazy because of this battle. Sure, they're going to be in range of the towers, because I think the towers have 300 range, I believe. But anyways, we get them up here and you're like, man, I'm going to hit a jackpot up in here. And what you're going to notice is, it seems that the ability is not taking into account that the units are all the way up. It's like shooting them when they are at the ground. Now, if I get closer, right, and I start to shoot at the units on the wall, it's actually arcing. So it seems that the volley ability is not necessarily taking into consideration the height of a unit when it is shooting. So take that into account when you're trying to use the ability. Now, when you're playing campaign, you're going to notice that abilities can have options to how much further they can be upgraded. Now, those options will be summarized on the title of the skill. So for example, if we look at Blood Sacrifice here, you see that in parentheses it says morale and damage. That means that from the Blood Sacrifice skill, this hero has the upgrade to morale and damage bonus from this skill. Now for Divine Challenge, there's something very unique here. you're gonna notice that the generic heroes that have Divine Challenge have the upgrade for duration. But if we look at, for example, Achilles, he has the Divine Challenge upgrade for armor. And if we look at Sparta, he has also the Divine Challenge upgrade for armor. Now, if you're coming from Warhammer 2, there is something interesting to think about in terms of abilities. So when you're playing, for example, Warhammer, you notice that the skills or abilities for combat are at the bottom and you can select them at a cost, right? So for example, here we have this ability called Heraclean Resolve, which if you were in Warhammer, you would have to pre-select it to have it in the battle, and it will cost you some of the funds that you can use for the battle you're going to be in. Here, all the skills that the developer decided that the character should have in combat are innately enabled when you select the character. What you can pay for is the mount option. And depending on the type of hero that you select, you have different options and you decide which one you want to utilize for combat. They can range from skirmisher chariot, light skirmisher chariot, reinforced melee chariot, and I'm not sure if there's actually like a light chariot unit. I think that's it. So you got different mount options, and whatever skills the hero has, you will be able to use them when you are in combat without having to pay an additional cost for these skills. Note that heroes can hide, but the moment that they get on a chariot, they can no longer hide for combat. There are 4 types of heroes in the game. We have what are called defenders, archers, fighters, and warlords. Now, when you look at them, you might be like, well, what makes one different than the other? Well, aside from archers being the ones that have missiles, what the others do not, the unit statistics vary on some of them, the missile block chance varies on some of them, and all of them have different abilities. So for example, if we look at defenders here, you look at the unit statistics, you don't really see anything change, right? Well, if you hover over missile block chance, you notice that defender veterans have 75%, while defender companions have 65, and defender protectors have 75 again. Across the archers, there is no difference here across unit statistics, but there is a variation on the abilities. So now for the fighters, we see that fighter and champion look like they have unit statistics, but there is a missile block chance difference, 75% to 65% respectively, while fighter vanquishers have 5 more morale than the other 2 counterparts, and they are back at 75% missile block chance. Now going to the warlords, the commander has 65% missile block chance, the mentor has 55, and the final one, the warmonger, has 5 more morale than the other 2 counterparts and 55% missile block chance. Now, since there are 4 types of heroes, and within each of them you have 3 variations, right, of each of the types, what makes one variation different than the other? So there's 2 ways to look at it. Look for the abilities at the bottom, that's the more descriptive way to know, or explicit way. And if you hover over the tooltip of the respective type or the respective hero type variation, you can find a summary of what makes them unique. Let's look at Commander of the Warlord. Commander heroes specialize in supporting ally units, granting them bonuses in battle. When you read that, you might think in absolutes. They only do abilities that potentially support ally units, right? Not exactly. They actually have a negative one that does reduce the morale of enemies, while we have here abilities that help allies respectfully on the other 2 that you see. So what is a Warlord Commander useful for? Well, looking at the bonuses that they give, they are good for increasing melee defense, melee attack, giving berserk to units, which will make them go unruly, of course. You also have a percentile increase to melee defense and melee attack, so this means that your units will get a probability of being hit less and a probability that they might hit more. And finally, they reduce the morale of enemy units, helping your units that don't have as much AP damage be able to succumb any armor or some armor that the enemy has. Now, Warlord Mentors, when we look at this here, they says that they are very good for the campaign map. Oh, and believe me, they are. They're probably the best in the campaign map. But it says that they have varying sets of skills that support army operations on the campaign level instead on the battlefield. Well, it's like, well, what the hell? Where are they even on the multiplayer? Well, let's look at their utility. So Rallying Cry is a good flanking counter. If one of your units gets flanked, they can get big hits to their morale and melee defense, so Rallying Cry can provide some counter to those penalties that you get hit by. Then you have Seize the Moment that helps reduce the weapon damage that a unit potentially has and their melee defense. Units that have good weapon damage and melee defense tend to be heavy and spear units, so this could be good to potentially hit against a heavy unit that's preventing you from moving forward or blocking a path on the battlefield. And then you have Truce. This is a pretty interesting one. This is very good for your own heavy units potentially. It does give a bonus to melee defense and to your units, and then it decreases the melee attack of the enemy. So it makes your unit potentially be hit less, and it makes the enemy get hit more. This goes hand in hand with the enemy having an offensive unit and you having a defensive unit. All around, when you see this, what this is saying is Truce and Rallying Cry are very good to counter flanking units and high DPS units, while Seize the Moment can be useful for that situation as well, the latter, or to just try to hit up a heavy unit that the enemy has to try to inflict some damage on whatever they have that is durable. So what are Warlord Warmongers good for? So they appear to have 3 offensive abilities. I want to basically try to summarize my idea of what I think they're good for. So looking at these, Berserk will cause the enemy units in an AoE to just, go Berserk. Now, actually this ability is called Taunt and it causes Berserk. Let me clarify that. Now, the thing about Berserk is that with the utility of terrain in a Total War Saga Troy and the differences in mass, you can pull units to very unfavorable encounters by potentially using Berserk to make them attack another unit that is in a terrain that would cause big penalties to the unit that is Berserk. A perfect example of this is that you Berserk a chariot unit, and the chariot unit then gets stuck in mud against a medium weight maybe or lightweight unit to basically get them into not such a favorable situation. Then you have what's called Ares Thunder, which is another ability that is an AoE, and it causes melee defense and armor debuffs. Knowing that heavy spear units tend to have really high statistics for both of these parameters, this is a really good ability against heavy frontline units to make them resist less AP damage and have a higher probability of getting hit in combat. Finally, Embrace of Ares is telling you, hey, for units that are potentially defensive, I'm gonna give you more weapon damage, so when you hit pretty hard, and you have a bit better missile parry. So this extra missile parry can be very useful for like mid-tier units that might have not necessarily 75% missile block chance, but a bit less than that, and the weapon damage will help boost them up a bit more to hit harder. This could be very useful for like club units that have a high magnitude of weapon damage, and you could use them to potentially inflict more damage and get hit less by missiles when they try to do some flanking maneuvers. I'm giving an example, but from the look of this, you can really boost up units with high magnitudes of weapon damage, and with mid levels of missile parry to get better in both statistics, you can heavily affect melee defense and armor to potentially decrease the stats of units with high of these two statistics, like heavy units. And then Berserk can pull units to unfavorable encounters based on terrain or weight differences. Now, for Archer Skirmisher, they're really good for boosting the stats of units around them and their own damage. So they have Inspired Aim to really boost base missile damage and AP missile damage by 40% each. Then for AoE, for missile units, you can get minus 30% reload skill and plus 100% accuracy. And finally, you have Deadly Focus, which is another AoE that gives a magnitude increase of plus 10 accuracy and plus 15 morale. So these two can be very helpful to make your own archers more deadly, or potentially not rout if they get flanked, or or are very low in their morale bar, if they want to call it that, if they're pretty close to wavering. So just very helpful AoEs for your own units, especially missile units, and also let your own archer hero do more DPS damage. Did I really just end that saying DPS damage? What? So we have here Archer Tricksters. Now, the thing about these guys is that they can heavily help, say that the Archer Trickster gets into a situation where they could be like attacked by someone that could take them out. You could use this ability to really help you try to escape from the engagement, take a pretty good plus 35% damage resistance, which is really good, and then plus 30 magnitude increase to melee defense, giving you 82 total melee defense. Basically, it's going to be pretty hard for someone to hit you, and if they do, it's not going to hurt that much, and you could potentially run away pretty fast, which is helpful for you in the end. Then you have Triple Shot. which is something that is like a volley of arrows hitting in an AoE on the ground, and it's just gonna hit multiple units with it. So it's basically a DPS ability. And finally, you have Strafe, both also for the unit itself, and this does give melee defense, and instead of damage resistance, it gives missile resistance, more speed and missile damage for the own unit. This one appears to be very useful if this archer is engaged against another archer hero, so you can trade better with it. Now we can move on to fighter champions. So fighter champions only have 2 abilities, not that many, but one of them makes them very deadly. So Cleave gives plus 20 magnitude increase to melee attack, giving them a super good plus 80 melee attack and plus 20% AP damage, and the unit already has 160, giving it a pretty good magnitude increase of, if I can do math correctly, what is that, like 36? Wait, how much is, what the hell? 20%? What am I doing? 32 more AP damage. Oh my god, what the hell's wrong with my math? So basically giving a unit more DPS or a higher probability to hit, and then more missile resistance if it's engaging against an archer hero. So it could potentially close in on an archer hero if the archer hero's not running that fast for some reason, and then really inflict a lot of damage on it to take it out pretty fast. Now the thing about fighter ravagers is that they are very good for causing morale penalties on the battlefield. So the thing, and more DPS damage for themselves. So the thing about them is though that their abilities cost a lot of rage to use, except one of them, which is one that actually increases how much rage you get. So Blood Sacrifice really helps you and units in an AoE around you get a really good 60% more base weapon damage and plus 20 morale. So if you have club units or units that don't necessarily inflict, too much damage, you could help them out a little bit more with this little steep bump. Actually, it might be better for units to have a good magnitude of weapon damage so the percentage is a really good increase on the base magnitude. But aside from that, with the increased rage, you can first off get Aristea faster, because when you use rage, you gain Aristea, and when you gain rage, you also gain it. So this will really help you close in into Aristea faster. Now, Terrify will do a huge minus 30 penalty in an AoE, which is pretty steep. Note that it cannot affect a hero unit. And then you have Rage, which is good for yourself, and this one will really boost up your base weapon damage, give you Berserk, which is kind of a detriment. I mean, you want to kind of close in on a specific unit or hero, right? And then you cause Fear, which is pretty good to cause a good penalty to overall morale. Note that with the rage cost that these abilities both have, it's going to be pretty hard to pull off one rage ability after the other, because it's 75 and 100, and rage caps out at 100. Fighter Vanquisher, easiest way to summarize them is DPS, just damage others. So Song of Battle will really boost up their offensive capability, but really hurt them in the probability of getting hit. And then Cleave, basically the same thing as mentioned before, just pretty good melee attack bonus and a good AP damage bonus as well. But the unique thing about this unit, or this hero, is that they have Divine Challenge. So when you do a Divine Challenge, the target and you have to engage in combat, and this can really pull an enemy unit that might not have that much good HP, might not be in a very good situation, to have to be in combat with you for the next 90 seconds. Note that, now this is from my testing, I hope I'm not wrong about this, that once you're using this, you cannot utilize abilities while you are in Divine Challenge, you or the other player. If I'm wrong, leave a comment, just let me know. But certainly a very good ability, even if it does not do that, because you can pull another hero unit into a bad one-on-one engagement and take off a chunk of their HP. Now for Defender Veterans, they have 2 abilities for self that make them more resilient in combat. So Pain Barrier gives them 20% ward save, pretty much standard there for 90 seconds, which is pretty good. And then you have Oracular Resolve, which gives Unbreakable and Immortal. So very good to pop if you're about to rout, or you have very low HP, so you can last for 25 seconds and maybe get Aristea around that time, so you can get damage or bonus and HP gain right then and there. Then you have Jet of Ares, that is pretty good for causing morale and stamina penalties and some missile resistance on another unit, which can be very good if you want to focus on a unit with very good missile block chance to really put it in an unfavorable situation against missiles. Defender Companion literally take the word companion as a literal thing here. Only two abilities on the defender companion, and they're both very helpful for HP gain for your own units. You can pop it on yourself or your ally in an AoE affecting other allies and get plus 10 HP healed per second for 45 seconds, which is how much HP in total? 450? That's a pretty good gain. Note that it does not revive unit models. It's just HP gain for your unit models that are still alive while they're getting healed, right? And then you have Hallowed Ground, which is an AoE. You can pop it on self or ground, and it gives plus 15 morale, plus 15 magnitude increase to melee defense. That's really good. And plus 30% missile resistance. So if you look at that missile resistance increase, it's kind of a counter to potentially the Dread of Ares from the Defender Veteran popping it on a unit. Now, Defender Protector also has Divine Challenge. Like, who the hell had Divine Challenge again? Let me go back over here so I don't mistakenly say somebody's type wrong. Fighter Vanquisher. So if we look at this guy, they have Divine Challenge as well. But this guy can help himself in combat if it's engaged and does not need speed to close in on another unit to basically have more armor to take less AP damage, which can be very helpful. And then you have Immovable Force that applies to yourself and allies in range, right, around them to give plus 25 more armor. So you can get a total of, what, 20 and 25 armor, which is pretty damn good. And then you can, but you're going to get pretty steep speed penalties. You're going to become like a freaking snail. Damn. So just take into account this, but you get really good morale, making the unit that takes this take less probable AP base damage than it normally would. And then here with this gain for yourself, you can take more or less base damage than you normally would. Now these, well, how many factions is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 6 epic heroes of these factions are all effective negatively in their abilities when they are mounted, because they have abilities that are not usable if they are mounted anymore. So for example, Odysseus has Sheet Hades, In Hades Shadow, and Strafe. Paris and Hippo have Apollo's Aim. Ajax has Heraclean Throw. Achilles has, I think, Divine Challenge. And then Menelaus, I think it is Divine Challenge as well. And then he has Dread of, actually that's actually the only one. Yeah, just like Achilles then. Divine Challenge is the one that he cannot use if he is mounted. Now, the 5 epic heroes of Mycenae, Salamis, Dardania, Sparta, and Lycia have the ability to gain Encourage when they are on certain mounts. So here Ajax, he's on a reinforced melee chariot and he is not gaining Encouraged when he's on this mount. When he's unmounted, he doesn't have it either. Note that he has Immune to Psychology in both of these situations. On a Skirmisher Chariot, he still has Immune to Psychology, but when we go to Light Skirmisher Chariot, he loses the Immune to Psychology and he gets Encouraged. For Agamemnon, he has here Skirmisher Chariot given Encouraged, but he loses it when he goes to no mount and gains back Immune to Psychology, similar to Ajax. When he is on a Light Skirmisher Chariot, just like when he's on a Skirmisher Chariot, he loses Immune to Psychology and gains Encouraged. When he's on a Melee Chariot, none of the both are there. Now we go to Dardania here. He has none of the two. When he's not mounted, when he goes to Melee Chariot, neither. But when he goes on a Skirmisher Chariot, he gains Encouraged. For Menelaus, he does not have it when unmounted, doesn't have it in Melee Chariot. On Skirmisher Chariot, he gains Encouraged, but not a Reinforced Melee Chariot. And finally, Sarpedon, no mount. Oh, no, he doesn't have the skill there, or the attribute. Once he goes to Skirmisher Chariot, he has Encouraged, and so does he when he's on a Light Skirmisher Chariot. So when you see these, you're like, oh, so it's all the heroes when they have a Skirmisher Chariot and Light Skirmisher Chariot that gain Encouraged. But if I go back to, I think it is, yeah, Ajax, that's not the case here. He's the exception where when he has a Skirmisher Chariot, he's not gaining the Encouraged like the rest of these people are. Note that once you start going through the generic heroes, none of them actually give Encouraged when they are on these skirmisher chariots that I have talked about. Now there are a number of abilities in the game that when the heroes are mounted, they can no longer be used. They are Divine Challenge, Immovable Force, Sheet Hades, this one's exclusive to Odysseus, Triple Shot, Strafe, Heraclean Throw, which is unique to Ajax, Apollo's Aim, which are unique or is unique to Paris and Hippolyta, and Hades Shadow and Strafe, which both are unique to Odysseus. Now, aside from the mentioned epic heroes that lose abilities when they are mounted, because the abilities are made like that, there is two generic heroes that are affected by it, and they are the Defender Protector and Fighter Vanquisher, and the Archer Trickster also suffers from this. Now, I've gone through a lot of abilities for the generic heroes, so for the epic heroes, I just want to focus on the abilities that they have that are unique to them, or at least that the generic heroes do not have. So you have Pulverize or Ajax. Now, Ajax has splash attacks that not that many other heroes have. I think it's Penny, Hector, Achilles, and Ajax, and this will help him inflict 30% more splash attack, which means that he'll do pretty good if he's going up against like a unit, not necessarily a hero. He's gonna have more speed, way more charge bonus, and less attack interval. So he'll basically do more DPS, especially if he's charging on another unit with this ability, and then inflict a pretty good amount of splash attack on it. So he could potentially inflict a lot of damage on a unit during the 90 seconds that Pulverize is active. And that is actually the only ability. Oh, right. I forgot about it because it's that bad. There's Heraclean Throw, which is a very inaccurate boulder throw that basically hits enemies that it hits, if it hits them, because it almost never hits them, and it causes damage. The good thing about this though is that it actually applies a penalty of being shot by artillery, which is pretty damn good. I think it's -8 or -10 morale penalty, which is pretty steep. Now, Diomedes has an attribute or ability. I don't even know what the hell this is. This is Might of Athena, and this gives plus 30% more melee attack, which is huge given that he has a base melee attack of 70, and he can get plus 300% more Aristea points. So the trick to using this, right, this lasts for 40 seconds. The rate of gain of Aristea points is higher when rage is used versus when rage is gained. So make sure that you have enough rage to utilize Cleave and Pulverize, or one of the two at least, because both add up more than to 100. And then first you use Might of Athena, and then use one of those two abilities, right? And actually, you could mix Rallying Cry with Pulverize together to use 100 rage, and that way you can gain the most bang for your buck from this 300% more Aristea points that is active for 60 seconds. Now, Aeneas has Divine Challenge. He also has Divine Regeneration, which does give HP healed per second for himself and provides rage when activated. Then he has March of Hermes, helping units gain more stamina and also gain more speed. Then you have the Shout, which helps units and yourself gain weapon damage, morale, and a melee attack at a big cost to rage of 75. And then you have Blood of Heracles, which provides rage when activated and gives you a big boost to melee attack at 50%. Now, Hector has good abilities for himself, like Heraclean Resolve, Divine Focus, which gives him good amount of AP and base weapon damage, 30% each, but it does increase his attack interval at +2, and it does cause 2 rage per second. Then you have Favor of Asclepius, giving a good HP bonus per second. Now, for units or abilities that help himself and units around him, he has the Shout, giving weapon damage, morale, and melee attack, and then he has Vanquish, giving speed, AP damage, and charge bonus. Now, Hippolyta is a variation of different types of abilities, so she has one that helps herself allies around her gain +10 accuracy and +15 morale. Then he has one that helps herself gain more missile damage and speed with Flight of Artemis. For units around her and enemies around her, she gets +30% melee defense and to units around her, and for enemies, a big hit of -50% to melee attack. Now, you can also do Ares Thunder, which causes -30% melee defense and -20% armor to enemies in range of her. And you also have Apollo's Aim, which is a single shot that inflicts good amount of damage on single targets. So Odysseus is all about hiding and inflicting as much damage as possible because he has something called In Hades Shadow that gives him Snipe, Unspottable, and Stalk. So he can get as close to 20 meters to another unit and keep shooting it and keep inflicting a lot of HP damage for 67 seconds, which is huge. He also has an ability that gives him even more missile damage and speed with Flights of Artemis. He has Triple Shot, which is basically a volley of arrows shot in an area of you gotta select the enemy and it affects the enemy and enemies in range that get hit by it. And then you have Strafe that really helps him try to escape from a bad engagement and also inflict more missile damage, making him trade well with another missile hero. Now Sarpedon is all about AoE abilities, helping your own units and not really helping the enemy units. So he has here Seize the Moment, which affects enemy and enemies in range, could be generals, minus 25% armor, minus 50% melee defense. For self or ground, affects allies in an AoE. He can do 15 melee defense magnitude increase, missile resistance upgrade, and plus 15 morale. He has Rallying Cry on self and allies AoE, plus 25 morale, plus 10% melee defense. False Portent, giving minus 25 morale around himself to enemies in an AoE. And finally, Taunt, which gives Berserk to an enemy selected and enemies in an AoE for about, what, 80 seconds? Pretty good. Now, Agamemnon is like Sarpedon in that he's all about AoE, but he's primarily about helping his own units in an AoE and himself. So he gives to self and allies in an AoE plus 18% stamina. He gives to self and allies in range plus 25 morale plus 10% melee defense. He gives, self and allies in range plus 20 morale and plus 70% weapon damage and helps him generate rage. Ooh, almost a word salad again. And then for self and allies in range, plus 10% melee attack and plus 10% melee defense. As for everybody's favorite Ladouche, Paris has got abilities that really help him and allies in an AoE. So he's all about missile units, right? So for himself, he gets plus 25% speed and far whilst moving. For self and allies in range, accuracy of, plus 100%, AP missile damage, and a reduction to reload skill. He has Apollo's Aim, which is basically him doing a good shot on an enemy, which inflicts some damage. And then Swift Heal, giving reload skill and missile damage to himself. And finally Snipe, which it's kind of funny that it's called Snipe because there's a Snipe hiding attribute, if that's an attribute, that, you can shoot without being noticed. But he has an ability called Snipe that helps him have more accuracy, more range, and cause more AP missile damage. Penthesilea is all about boosting her stats and her own unit stats in terms of offensive capabilities, and then hurting this enemy's defensive capabilities. So she has None Left Standing that gives plus 20 melee attack to ally and allies in range, which is crazy, plus 20. But she does cause Berserk to those units, which is not good, but it's only 10 seconds in total for the entire ability. She does have Ares Dunder, causing melee defense and armor debuffs to self with enemies around her in an AoE. Oof. And then she has Embrace of Ares, helping herself and allies in range get 15% more weapon damage. And finally, she has Song of Battle, letting her potentially hit more over time with a -1 attack interval, but having a higher probability of getting hit with a -15% melee defense. Now, Achilles is all about power, just killing, and unique to him, he has freaking Unbreakable. Also immune to Psychology, which is I think found on Agamemnon and Ajax, maybe some other epic heroes that I can't remember here, but he does have Divine Challenge, Ares Rage, which helps him do a lot more damage and cause fear. He does have Cleave, giving him more stamina, melee attack, and AP damage. He does have Blood of Heracles, giving more melee attack and more rage when activated, or provides rage when activated. And then he has Terrify, causing -30 morale and -15 melee defense. Now Menelaus has Divine Challenge, which reduces armor, and then he has this one that just gives more missile resistance of plus 20%, which is actually not missile block chance, right? It's that missile resistance, so anything that hits a unit will be reduced, or that is a missile, will be reduced by 20%. Then he has Threats of Fate, which is for himself, which gives -20 armor, and it gives plus 50 melee attack. 50! It gets to 108, which is pretty damn crazy. And then he has plus 50% more weapon damage, really good. And then finally he has Dread of Ares, which greatly reduces melee attack of enemy units, -25%, really good for flanking or taking out flanking units, right? Their potential damage, lowering morale, and also lowering stamina. of a single unit. It says here, right? This is very confusing. The effect is on a single enemy unit, but it says here that it can affect an enemy and enemies in an AoE. So yeah, kind of a bit contradicting there unless I'm reading this mistakenly. I really want to thank you for watching this video and appreciate the 2 hours that you've put in to just watch this. And maybe you just skipped to this last tip and watched it. But anyways, I sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, want to say thank you. And I hope that at least something here was useful to you, either as a new thing that you learned or a friendly reminder of something that you might have seen years ago. I mean, I know myself, and there's plenty of things in Total War that probably I learned years ago. In fact, I might have learned it last year, and then I just totally forget about it. But it is good to go back and potentially review some things and remember them or learn them for the first time. So I really want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye bye.